Hi, I'm Stephen King. Well, actually, I'm not Stephen King, but the purpose of my saying that is that's the first line in our story. And first lines are usually important. And what I do in those 4 words is I'm letting you know that this is going to be irreverent and fun, and it's going to be a little jokey at times. And I know who writers like Stephen King are. I hope that people who take this course or listen to me will pick up a lot of tricks of the trade. And I think it's a couple levels. I think one are people that want to write books or think they want to write books. And it can help them to make that decision about whether they're actually going to invest the time or not. And I'll give them a lot of tips in terms of how to invest that time well. I'm very, very efficient, and I'll take a lot of the time-wasting things out of the process if you'll listen. But also people who like to read books, like to read mystery, suspense, even kids' books, I think they'll find it very, very interesting. I think it'll be very cool. I don't think they'll read books the same way again after listening to this. What I'm going to try to do with the class is go right from the beginning, from the raw ideas for books, character, how to build a character, how to create a scene. We'll deal with how to make a chapter work. We'll deal with outlines. Outlines are huge. We might do a couple of chapters on outlines. We'll talk about marketing at some point, which is more of a curiosity, I think, for most of you, because you shouldn't worry too much about marketing. I think a lot of people who watch this, it's going to turn them on. It can be very stimulating. And I think, along the way, I had a couple of people. I had a professor at Vanderbilt, and he did get me excited about, one, just the process of writing the book, and 2, my own talent. And just a lot of things that he said clicked with me. And so, when I left his class, I had to write a book. By the way, that book didn't get published, but it was part of the process, because I've been there. Starting out, you don't know if you're any good. You don't know if you're ever going to get published. It's a very difficult. It's a daunting thing to sit down and start a book. Because at the end of the trail can be embarrassment or heartbreak or all sorts of things. So we're going to get over that. No heartbreak, no embarrassment. We're going to have the tools to do this. And I think that's very exciting. And it's exciting to me to stimulate people to go out there and write not just great mysteries, but whatever kind of book you want to write. Somebody said, you're lucky if you find something in life that you love. And then it's a miracle if somebody will pay you to do it. And I think that's what ideally you want to move toward, that you found something you love. And look, when you start doing this, if you don't love it, you're not going to finish the book. You're not going to finish the outline, and that's okay. All that's telling you that's not what you're going to do. You have an interest in it, you like it, but you're not that passionate about it. If you are passionate about it, you can't help yourself. You got to write it. You got to write that outline. You got to write that book. The great thing about Vanderbilt was I had a professor there by the name of Sullivan, and he said, you are very, very good. You can do this. You can be a novelist. Practice, 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 practice. And through this period, I was reading 10 to 12 novels a week. I swear to God, novels and plays. I was reading everything I could get my hands on. I was scribbling everything I could. At one point, I went up and I stayed a week in a Trappist monastery just thinking about my vocation and whether I could do this thing. And, the Trappists have this silence thing, it was kind of weird, but it was also very cool in terms of really focusing. Is this what I want to do with my life? Do I want to be a writer? Can I do it? And I really came out, and it was a life-changing thing for me. I came out of there going, I'm going to go for this. Once again, passion. No, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. I get a job in advertising. I knew I had to go to work. I was getting up at 5 in the morning to write. I didn't really want to get up at 5 in the morning, but that was the only place I could fit it in. I would fit in a couple of hours. But when I was writing the Thomas Behrman number, it really was that sort of 5 to 7 in the morning. And I did have to force myself just because I didn't want to get up at 5 o'clock. It wasn't I didn't want to write the book, but I didn't want to get up at that time. But I did it every day. I really think it's useful to get into that and do not sit there like, oh, I don't feel like it today. I don't feel like it tomorrow. Feel like it. Do it. Force yourself, even if it's half an hour. And half an hour isn't enough. Try to at least get Figure out an hour somewhere on the train before you go to work. Get up earlier. When you come home before dinner, after dinner, you're going to have to figure out when it's going to be comfortable for you to do it. But I think it's really, really useful to get into that discipline. It's like any other habit, running, or, once you get into it becomes a ritual, a routine in your life, you don't even have to think about it so much. And then hopefully it's a joyful thing as well. When I was a kid, I grew up in this little river town, and there wasn't a hell of a lot to do. In the summers, once a week, my grandfather would take me on his delivery route, and we would pack up the truck at 4 a.m. and off we'd go, and he would do this 6 days a week. And we all know that delivering products to stores is not the most exhilarating thing in the world, especially when you're getting up at 4 a.m. and getting home at 7 or 8. But my grandfather was a terrific guy and very positive, and he would always sing. He would go over the mountain, the Storm King Mountain toward West Point. He would always be singing. He'd sing all those songs from that era, put another nickel in the Nickelodeon and Oh Susanna and whatever. And he had a terrible voice, terrifying, just a horrendous voice. But he said to me, Jim, when you grow up, and I'm a little kid, I'm 8, 9, 10 years old, he said, whether you become the president or a surgeon, or if you wind up driving a truck as I do, just remember that when you go over the mountain to work in the morning, you gotta be singing. I do. I'm singing every day. I'm singing on my way to work every day. I practically sang here on my way to do this class. And that's where you have to be. And if it's all pain, there's something wrong. There's something wrong. Try to fix it. You're listening to me, and certain things you should walk away with and try to do, and certain things you kind of have to ignore. So you got to pick out what you think you can handle and deal with. Look, my first novel was turned down by 31 publishers. We could say, since it won best, first novel in America, we could say they were all wrong. Okay. So there's 34 wrong opinions, and I think you kind of objectively say they were all wrong. So you have to be careful about what you hear, and you have to be resilient, and you have to be tireless in terms of just moving forward with something. I mean, I could have said, after 5 rejections, shit, I don't have it, man. 5 publishers, they must know what they're doing, right? They turned the book down. Well, clearly, I don't want to say all of them didn't know what they were doing, because sometimes it just doesn't fit what they do, or they have another author or a couple of authors that do the same thing, or they've already bought a bunch of first novels that year and they just aren't going to do it, or the editor didn't make a good case at their editorial meeting, whatever the heck it is. But a lot of them were just wrong. John D. McDonough is a famous mystery writer. He writes a blurb for my first book, The Thomas Behrman Number, and it's perfect for what we're doing. It's perfect for what I had done previous to writing that novel. And what McDonald said was, I'm quite sure that James Patterson wrote 1 million words before he started The Thomas Behrman Number. And that's the key here, okay? You may have to write 1 million words. Maybe you've already written 1 million words and you're ready right now. But that's how it works, and it's all driven by passion. And the beauty for me, the gift for me, the miracle for me is I still have the passion that I had when I started. I'm not cynical about it. I'm not skeptical about it. I love it. I loved it when I was 19, and I love it right now when I'm 39 or so, 40, whatever I am. Are you going to succeed with that first book? Some people do. I didn't, actually. I started a book. They actually let me write fiction for my master's thesis at Vanderbilt. I started a book there, continued it. It never got published. I then took off for a little while. I was, kind of disappointed that it didn't get accepted, and a little disappointed in myself. I think I always was like, okay, that was yesterday, today's today, on we go. I think that there rarely have people really bought into and said, oh, you can do this. I mean, it took me into my 40s before people really believed in the kind of fiction I was writing. One of the reasons that I will blurb, especially first novels, is I've been through this. I've been through this, the insecurity, the oh my God, the rejection letters. Every short story I ever sent out, anywhere I sent it, from the New Yorker to Red Book, it was rejected. So I've been through that. I remember it. I can feel the pain. I identify with it. I have the scars. The scars don't go away. I am as passionate about writing books today as I was when I was 19 years old. That has not changed. It's a gift. And I think it's really important that you try to, no matter what happens, whatever setbacks, however hard it might be, that you keep that passion alive, because that's going to drive you through the hard times, and it's going to really make you enjoy the good times. People will always ask this stupid question, where do I come up with my stories? No, I'm kidding. People frequently ask, where do I come up with the stories? And it really can be anything. As I have this big folder of ideas, that's a piece of it. So how do these ideas get into the folder? I'll see something on the street, or I'd probably write a story about anything. I mean, I could write a story about the classroom here, probably, figure out a way to make it an interesting mystery. Sometimes a title will come to me. Sometimes just some little scene I'll see in the street. Just some little thing catches my eye, and I go, oh, that stimulates something in me. The idea for the Women's Murder Club, women frequently are more collaborative than men are. And I notice this in business. A man will come in and go, I got it. They have the idea, whatever. Whereas a lot of times women will come in and they want to hear the other people's ideas in the room and contribute and get to something. So that collaboration, and I found that interesting. And in the world of detective fiction, it didn't seem to me there was much of that. So the idea of a police inspector, a medical examiner, an assistant district attorney. Now, they would normally be together. They would know each other, presumably, and could have become friends. And then a little tricky with putting a journalist in there, because they would have issues maybe with sharing some information with the journalist. But they come to trust the journalist, Cindy. And they get together and they just chat about cases. And, is it realistic? No, not really. I don't write realism. But it's kind of a cool idea that you get four women together and they would collaborate on solving mysteries. And maybe it's been done somewhere, but I'm not aware of it. So I just want that. I think that's a cool idea. One of my favorite, if not my favorite, of the novels I've written is one called Honeymoon. And you start out with the book and you always hope it's going to be spectacular, and you just never know. You start writing and some of them turn out better than others for whatever the reason is. That one started with the idea of, I love the idea of a woman who was a bigamist. So that's where it started, a woman who would, and it went a lot of different places from there. But the way the book opens is you have this couple and they're married and they're in bed together, and it's just a delightful Sunday afternoon, and they make love, and you really like them. You like the way they interact, you like their dialogue. You go, I'd love to be there. I'd love to, that's the way I want my life to be. And then she has to go off. It's Sunday. She's got to go off on a business trip. And she goes to Boston, and she arrives in Boston, and she goes to a brownstone there, and, she walks in, honey, I'm home. She's got another husband in Boston. And as it evolves, you find out that she actually she's a black widow bigamist, which is even cooler. Not only does she have more than one husband, she's actually going to kill them. So I'm so hooked, I can't tell you, for myself, both as a writer and a reader. And then we're going to introduce an FBI agent who primarily gets involved in it because of some of the insurance settlements, which seem a little peculiar. And he starts stalking this woman, and he's a clever dude, but she's irresistible. And against his better judgment, he starts to kind of a little bit, in a believable way, fall for her slowly, and he knows he can't do this, and this is too stupid for words, but she's irresistible. And as he falls for a little bit, he starts believing that she really couldn't have, knocked off these husbands. It had, as she said, they had to have been accidents. And so now we have, the workings of a pretty cool story, and where the hell's it going to go? When I got out of school, I started working at ad agency J. Walter Thompson, but I've been clean for 20 years now. There was a book there about how to come up with ideas, and it was written in England. It was a pretty thick book, and I avoided reading it like all young creatives. I mean, what are they going to tell me? It sounds like a goofy idea anyway. Where do ideas come from? And about 15 years into my time in imprisonment at J. Walter Thompson, I actually had to read the book, and I read it, and it was terrific because it really did shed light on a lot of things. And one of the things that the author wrote about was his theory, and I don't know that this is totally accurate, but that it's very rare that somebody comes up with a totally fresh idea out of nowhere. More often what we do is put together disparate ideas that nobody has put together. So, people talk about the Beatles and how a lot of their music, they put together 3 different kinds of music that either nobody had put together or rarely was put together, and out of that came something kind of fresh. And they kept experimenting. They would hear, some music out of India, and all of a sudden that would stimulate them to do 3 or 4 songs by combining rock and roll with, But if they hadn't studied the music out of India, they would have never come up with some of those songs. And similarly, so if you had an idea that involved, rap and say Chinese pottery, a visual idea or whatever it was, and something new would come out. But if you don't know anything about Chinese pottery, you don't know anything about rap, you never have that idea. And the point there is learn about a lot of things. If you go through life, and a lot of kids do this, they just don't know too much. They'll know, everything about every movie and everything about every video game and beer. And they have those 3 categories. They know everything. They know nothing else. Well, it's very difficult to be creative if that's your whole universe of stimulation. Well, let's see. What do I do? It's going to be beer and a video game. The more you know about, the more likely you are to combine things into an idea that's striking. You're watching, you presumably have some idea for a novel or have had several ideas. It's really going to depend on what kind of novel do you want to write. If you want to make money, it's really useful to have an idea, a hook, something. I don't like the language of hook just because it feels like it's mechanical. But an idea, for a story idea, that when you tell people that idea, they go, tell me more. Okay? That's really important. Where they go like, that sounds so cool. I love that idea. Some feedback, and it's good to get it from a few people, because a lot of times your friends will go, oh, we love you, You know the way friends are these days. They lie. You're a great dancer. You have such a great smile, whatever. But you need some honest. So, actually what you want to do is go to your nastiest friends. The friends who are good friends, but they really will tell it like it's just. Now here once again, as you go out and get sort of grandmother testing, don't follow. If you really believe it and you can do it, don't listen to them. But it really is useful to have an idea because ultimately you're going to have to sell it to a publisher, and probably what they're going to want to see is a letter where you say, "I'm writing a book about," and when they go like, I don't think so. It really, it's that vicious. John Grisham always is very good at setting up a good hook early, and then he's a much more leisurely storyteller. He sets his hook. He's very confident that that's going to hold you. Here's the firm, and here's this nice guy lawyer, and he gets this unbelievable job in a law firm. But then there's always a catch. He finds out that this law firm is basically a big mafia. They work for the mafia and not in legal ways. And holy shit, I just took this job and I've moved to this area of the country and I bought a house and I'm trapped. So that's an interesting commercial hook. Obviously, there are a lot of books that don't really have a catchy idea. And it's just the writer's just so, it's going to create a character that's just so engaging. I mean, you know, the latest J.K. Rowling, there's no idea there per se where she could say, let me tell you about this story, or there's nothing in particular about the character. She's just a very, very good writer. And that's the trick in terms of the idea. Sometimes somebody's just it's just gonna be the view they have of a character and the view that character has of the world is going to be very engaging to people. And a lot of times with that, I mean, if you don't have that kind of, you know, the real catchy idea, you write a couple of chapters, have people read it, and just gauge about whether they want, oh, I'd love to read that, and not just because I'm your friend, but because it really sounds interesting. I think one of the funny things that writers do, and all of us do it, and I've done it, is that thing of you wake up in the middle of the night and you got to jot something down. I have stopped doing that. Similarly, I used to, if I ever took drugs, write stuff down, if that ever happened, writing things down. I wouldn't do that anymore, because what I found is if it really is a good idea, I will actually remember it. And having read all these various things, I go, this really isn't that terrific, and I got up to write that down. So I think you're going to remember your good ideas. There's a certain point where you do want to write them down, and I really do urge you to keep notebooks within reason, especially ideas. I have a big folder of ideas. I'm literally this thick. And when it's time for me to consider a new book, I will take out the folder and just start going through, and I'll usually write on a pad, just bulleted, 4, 5, 6 ideas that for whatever reason I'm feeling kind of good about. And then I stare at them for a while, and then I'll usually come down to one of them and go, let me see, let me start to put together an outline on this idea. Now, most people don't do that, but they probably should. I mean, you know, to keep an idea folder, I think, is a really good idea. Do that. I mean, just start jotting down just a couple of sentences, not a lot. Just what's the core there? What's the, Women's Murder Club? But that 4 women are going to collaborate. A human who can fly. A human who could swim like a fish. I mean, there are a lot of things you could theoretically write about that could be interesting. And then, keep enough of them, and then you look at, what, I keep coming back to this one. Look, we're going to talk a lot through the course of this thing about if there are secrets to writing a bestseller. I think the trick to it is you have to have a good gut, and that's important. And for me, it's emotion, and not everybody has this, but the ability to be very emotional about things and go, I love this, this is a great idea, I'm so passionate about this. But then to be able to step back and go, well, hold it. Am I really going to be able to write a whole book about this? Is anybody going to care? What's going to happen when I go to publishers? So those two pieces, I think, are really essential. The emotional side, what gets you excited initially, that's there, and there's some substance to it, hopefully. But then you can step back and go, okay, is this really something I can write 400 pages about? So that's a big part of the process, I think. And I don't know that I can teach that as much as just make you aware of it. And just be careful about investing too much in something that has you all excited, but it's not going to be a book. It's a ghost of a book. It's just not really a whole story there. Story is about the thrills and the twists and the turns, but more than anything else, it's about revealing character. In a thriller, it's how will that character react in a very dramatic situation. I really believe that character is revealed through action. Try to write every chapter as if it was the first chapter in the book. We pay a lot of attention to these first chapters because we know they're important. Try to write every chapter as if it's that important. Write a story, not necessarily a lot of pretty sentences. Write a story. Don't set out to write a good thriller. Set out to write a #1 thriller with a #1 story idea. Don't write a single chapter that doesn't propel the story forward. Leave out all the parts that readers are going to skim, okay? They're going to skim stuff. If you find it's that kind of writing, leave it out. Try to write for a single reader who's sitting across the desk from you, and you don't want them to get up until you're finished. And if you're smart, make that reader a woman. Why? Women buy 70% of the books. Women buy 70% of my books, which is interesting. A lot of people don't. They think that I have a lot of male readers, and I have a number of male readers, but more women. Now, let me just give you just a couple of thoughts about condensing plot into something that's manageable very quickly. So if you take The Great Gatsby, you start with Gatsby has everything anybody could ever dream of except love. Gatsby gets love. Gatsby loses love and thus loses everything. And that's kind of Gatsby. And we have E.M. Forster's famous line about story and plot. And he wrote, "A plot is a narrative of events, the emphasis falling on causality. The king died and then the queen died is a story, but the king died and then the queen died of grief is a plot. The time sequence is preserved, but the sense of causality overshadows it." Let's talk a little bit about personal stakes in a novel and a screenplay. You'll certainly hear that when if you've sold something with a studio or you're doing a television work or with your editor when you're doing your book, that the stakes need to be raised. And that essentially means that what's at risk here or what's to be gained is so important to the character, or should be, that you feel that the reader feels it big time. So if there's no stakes, and that's one of the things I'll talk about, having worthy adversaries. If you know as a reader, and you kind of know that the good guy is probably going to win the day, it can't be that simple. You have to feel that there are stakes here. So, worst case in the Cross books, in Hope to Die, or Cross My Heart, one book, and then Hope to Die, second book, the stakes couldn't be higher because Alex Cross's family has disappeared and he believes they're dead, but he's not 100% sure they're dead because there are little pieces of information that suggest maybe there's a tiny little bit of hope that his family isn't dead. That, especially for Alex, the stakes don't get any higher than that. And that's why those books are powerful, because the stakes are so high. So that always needs to be, not always, but almost always needs to be a piece of the puzzle. One of the keys to all drama is conflict. If there isn't any conflict, there isn't any drama. So there has to be your hero or your main character, even if the character isn't that heroic, it has to be a worthy opponent, that villain, whatever it's, or the puzzle needs to be a worthy puzzle that person needs to solve. It needs to be a puzzle that you're finding is challenging to solve as the detective or whoever's assigned to solve the puzzle. Or if it is a villain, that villain is really a worthy villain, and to some extent maybe even smarter and better and cleverer than your protagonist. So that's one kind of conflict. Another kind of conflict is, if there's a love story in your, what's the conflict there? What is, if it's a cop, invariably it's the cop life, which is not really good for a lot of people. So you can have people that are, really, really in love, and the woman's going, I love you so much, but I can't I can't be in this life. I just can't stand it when you go out and I don't know if you're going to come home, or the way you come home is so different from who I know you are. So that's a big, an example of the kind of, that's probably a little too overly familiar, but that kind of conflict, that love, the romantic or non-romantic, or why isn't this person ever been with anybody? And that's inner conflict, where the demons that this person has inside create the conflict is all inside the person. So yeah, I mean, nothing worthwhile happens, I think, without conflict. If you have villains in your book, and if you're writing mysteries and suspense, well, I mean, there's a couple of ways to approach it. Obviously, one is where you never see the villain until the end, and that's a decision you have to make. Is it gonna be a whodunit where you really don't know, or are you gonna know right from the get-go? Like in Invisible, you meet the villain very early, and the villain is fascinating. And if you're gonna reveal the villain early, then you really gotta map out the villain so that it's going to be interesting for people. That villain, following that villain cannot be one-dimensional. That villain has to be a worthy opponent. I've said that before, but most of the stuff I read in that genre, they're not worthy opponents. You know they're going to be defeated. And you know they're going to be defeated in a way that isn't that interesting. That's what makes it even worse. The chase has to be interesting. It's got to be where you're going, like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how the hell Cross is going to get this villain, or if he's going to get the villain even. And sometimes you just go, like, I wonder if he will. And sometimes they don't. Readers, some of the readers will have problems with that. If you let the villain get away at the end of the book, they go, that's not right. The villain didn't get it at the end of the book. But sometimes that's just the way you got to end a book. That's the way it felt right to you, and that's important too. That you know how this book should go. You know how that story. And the story should dictate to some extent something about the ending. You're not going to be able to pull a twist and surprise people in every scene, but you need to do it. You need to do enough so that, and you need to feel it. You need to feel that if the story's lagging, what can I do? And twists and surprises are one of the things you can do. Henry obviously believed in all of his stories having a sort of a big surprise, and that worked. Some writers use it more than others. I use it more than a lot of writers as a device. Readers like it. I think from a reader's point of view, if you could do it, having a surprise in every chapter would be just fine with the reader. I don't know if it would work, but if you pulled it off, I think readers would really like it. As you're starting to map out the story, less is more. Stick to the nuggets of the story. What's the story? If you had to tell me, your story in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, figure out a way to tell me that story in 15 minutes, and that'll be the core of your story. Now, you may flesh it out like crazy, and you're going to flesh out the characters, but there's the story. You should be able to tell that story, I would think, in 10 or 15 minutes or less. The more you BS when you're writing a book, the worse it is. And people have a real tendency to do that with thrillers and fantasy, just to start making stuff up. And that's really hard to do. So I think the research, one, it just makes the writing better. It builds your confidence because you actually know what you're talking about. Sometimes you read stuff in the research and it'll give you more ideas, things that you hadn't thought of. And that's another beauty of research. With Maxwell Murad and the Flying Kids, I wasn't sure where that was going. And then I thought of, sort of an outlaw lab. And then I went and did a little bit of research with biotech people. And they said that things like that in the world of biotech will happen in our lifetime, not necessarily humans with wings, but they said we could do that. We could do humans with wings. There'd be a lot of problems with it. But so I said, oh, well, that's kind of cool that you could do it. And that idea of kind of, a little bit of the Frankenstein thing. Okay, well, what have we created if we created flying kids? And that just, you begin to see the possibilities for the story. Different writers have different approaches to how they use research. In some cases, they really feel the need to build credibility with their readers. And some readers really love that, in particular males. Male readers really like they're very narrow in terms of what they like and they don't like, and they really want realism, and not every male, but an awful lot of them. And if they don't get it, they feel that it's just not authentic. It's not. So looking at a Picasso in terms of art, no, I don't get that artsy-fartsy stuff. So in particular for male readers, a lot of authentic detail is really useful. I mean, you can't tell them enough about cars or how a car works or how this, that, and the other thing works. And if you get it wrong, you lose them. I mean, you literally lose them. You get the information that you have about guns wrong. You lose anybody who knows anything about guns. They just go, well, if this writer doesn't know about, it can't get its facts straight. How can I believe anything in the story? But from my money, whether it's kidnapping, even a bee sting, research. What happens when it was a bee sting? What's if you're writing about go on the subway. I mean, you really don't fake it. Don't make it up. Look, if we go somewhere and somebody asks us, unless we're horrifying, verbal storytellers, we'll remember a few details that really capture it. Just a couple of things you go, this was cool, and this was cool, and this was cool. And, my son and wife just came back from Berlin, and they kept talking about things like, the fact that they have these water pipes all over the city built above the ground, and they're in colors. And so you're immediately getting very quick pictures in addition to some of the the ancient architecture, and then the new buildings that are going up that are pretty tasteful, and then the airport there, which by referendum they turned into a park but left it with the tarmac and everything, which is so there's a lot of, in a very little bit of information, there's a lot that gives you a sense of Berlin in a hurry. So I like to do that kind of research. If you're writing about a city that's important to your story and you haven't been there, it's really useful to go and walk around and make notes, and whatever catches your eye, catches your spirit. You'll find it very stimulating in terms of making everything more concrete in the story. You'll come up with ideas that you hadn't had before. Just wandering the streets of a new city or going to a crime scene. There may not be a crime there, but if you know the kind of building or the kind of apartment or whatever, just going to that neighborhood, wandering through that kind of apartment. Sometimes the police will help you. I mean, that gets more into the interview thing. If you're going to talk to, some cops detectives, homicide detectives, and they'll talk crime scenes, to you. But really, I was just thinking about, we're in New York City right now, and just, wandering around this neighborhood, if your hero lived here, or if this was an important scene, you're just going to pick up stuff. Pick up stuff about the way that people, and it'll be very stimulating for your writing. You'll write better. When I'm going to do research on an individual, I always try to find out a little bit about the person, both in terms of whether their expertise might be relevant to me, and secondly, whether they're the kind of people that, they're going to be it's really helpful if they're verbal. Otherwise, you might as well be reading stuff. And there's an awful lot to read now. I mean, pretty much anything you want to write about, somebody's written a lot about it. There's just a lot of stuff on the internet. But in terms of, ideally if you're going to interview people, you want people who are verbal, where they're going to be able, do you like being a policeman? Yes. No, this is no good. If you get in an interview, it's not working. I mean, for the most part, you just you try to dig in terms of, in particular, that notion of, and it usually loosens people up. When I asked Jack about his day and how was school this semester, good. No, it's an essay question, dude. I want to hear the whole, why do you say good? There's a reason why you said good or a reason why you said terrible or, whatever it is. You want them to be able to open up in terms of what it is. Why do they like doing what they do or hate doing what they do, or how does it work, or, what happens when you go on a stakeout, and is it boring, or are you afraid, or are you ever afraid, or have you ever fired your gun, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Mostly you won't have trouble getting your research done, because you're asking, one, there's a little bit of respect that people have for somebody who's writing a book. And that's a little piece of it. The other piece of it is you're asking them about stuff that they know and that mostly they want to talk about, that somebody's interested in what they do. And a lot of people like that. I remember when I wrote Along Came a Spider, I got to see the FBI, which was great. And the two guys that I talked to had been involved in the case of the Bronfman kidnapping, Bronfman, the Seagram's heir, and whatever. And they wouldn't shut up. It was great. I mean, they just kept talking. And I learned so much about kidnapping from those guys, from the FBI's point of view, what it's like for somebody who's been kidnapped, what it's like for the families, all the procedural stuff. And that really helped, because Along Came a Spider is about a kidnapping in a private school in Washington. With the Cross books, I had to learn a lot about forensic psychology, because Alex is a forensic psychologist. And, when Morgan Freeman agreed to take on the role, one of the reasons was he liked the idea of an African-American hero who wasn't the stereotype, who was not he was the male at home with the kids. He had gone to Johns Hopkins. He solved things with his head instead of a six-shooter. But to make that convincing, I had to know enough about forensic psychology. And one of the things with the psychology is I worked my way through college at McLean Hospital in Belmont, Mass., which is a very good psychiatric hospital. And then I had a lot of contacts. I still knew a lot of the psychiatrists. I knew some of the charge nurses. So enough said about that. I saw a lot of people who had mental problems. That was useful for me, just in terms of symptoms, and also understanding in a big way that these are just regular human beings. All this stuff about crazies running around, like even in the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, that has very little to do. I mean, it's a fun movie. It's a terrific movie, but it's not like that in any mental hospital and I've been in a few of them, not as a patient. So I really got in touch with abnormal psychology, a lot of things that go on, how normal a lot of these people are in most of their life, and that was very useful. What psychologists and psychiatrists are like, how they operate. And all of that was useful as I began to create Alex. One of the things you'll see that people do, and some of these are published writers and some of them are pretty well respected, you can almost feel them dropping the research on you. They've learned everything about the Louvre, and you're getting it now. They're just dumping it on you, okay? And I have an issue with that in fiction, for the way I look at it, which is if I'm writing first person, then obviously all you're going to hear about is things that character knows about. So you're limited to, what he's read, what he's seen, what he feels, et cetera, et cetera. But I think even, I really discourage, writing sort of omniscient third person, unless you're really, really, really smart, unbelievably smart, where you really are a god. And you know so much that you can actually, the way you're doing it, you're Tolstoy, and you can write because you got a view of the world, and that's great. But limited third person is a lot easier. And that's, so if you're writing about a character in the third person, really what should show up in that chapter for the most part is stuff that character knows about. So once again, unless that character knows a lot about the architecture for whatever reason, because he's a smart person, he or she is smart, or they're architects or whatever, it shouldn't be there. The other thing about research now, it's never been easier because of the internet. You can get at stuff now that used to really be hard. You'd be finding yourself in the stacks of the library, however far the library was from where you lived, and traveling all over the world and stuff. Now and just so much you can get on the internet. It's a lot easier now. So you have no excuses. The most common mistake that writers make, especially young writers, is they don't do an outline. They just wing it, and they just start, and that takes a certain amount of discipline. But I guarantee you that is a discipline that will pay off in you're gonna do a better book. It's gonna take less time. I will write anywhere from 3 to 6 drafts of every outline. And that's the most important piece for me. Literally writing that outline. Everything should be in the outline. The arcs of the characters, the main characters anyway, the villains, if they're villains, got to be in there. And the villains need to be complex. They cannot be simple-minded villains. I really want to build it around the nugget of the idea. I want to put in as much really juicy stuff as I can, and that if I read that outline, or anybody read that outline, they would say, what a terrific story, and how well you figured out these scenes. The outline should have tons of promise. You should be going, I can't wait to read this scene, or I can't wait to write this scene, because it's such a rich idea for a scene. The drama between these characters is just, it's just so delicious to sink my pencil into, sink my teeth into, sink my typewriter into, sink my computer into, whatever you're sinking. So, and that's one of the beauties of it. Some days I can't wait to write these next 2 or 3 chapters, just because the potential is so great. The only time I ever face the blank page is when I start the outline. And I don't find that daunting, because when you write an outline, you're not even thinking about sentences. You're thinking about laying the story. And that, by the way, is another tip. When you're writing a story, don't think about the sentences. Think about the story. Write the story down. We all know how to tell stories. We tell stories all the time. You already know how to do it. Write the story. Don't write sentences, write the story. What I do in terms of turning, once I get that idea that I love, or you get that idea that you love, I'll then just start writing scenes down, just 1 line, 2 lines. Alice Cross starts in his house. He's playing the piano. He's playing Gershwin. He gets a phone call from Samson, something fresh and exciting that grabs you, so you want to go across into the next scene. But I'll just keep writing out scene after scene, almost as though it's a movie. And at a certain point, I will organize those scenes. Now, the thing about scenes is, when you're writing a story, I'm going to say there are an infinite number of possibilities for scenes. There aren't an infinite number, but there are an awful lot of potential scenes. So, and you have to be aware of that. And ultimately, you have to choose the best scenes. But it starts with just scene after scene after scene. Now, in my books, obviously, there are a lot of scenes. There might be 120 different chapters or whatever. Your book might have 30. It might just be 30 scenes, whatever the heck it is. But just keep writing out those couple of lines. Eventually, I'll start getting rid of ones, and I'll keep adding them. And I might do that for a couple of weeks, just writing scenes down, possible scenes. At a certain point, as I said, I will put them in an order, and then I start fleshing them out a little. Not a lot. Every once in a while, I'll do one in a week and a half, but more often, it'll take me a month or 2 months, and there'll be 3, 4, 5 drafts. And every draft, just like I was writing a novel, I'm layering on more. One of the questions that people ask has to do with how does the mystery move forward? Do you blow it all early? Do you blow it in pieces? Do you Um, and I think that really comes down to your gut and how you're going to, and that needs to get established real early in terms of your outline and stuff. If you're going to reveal a lot of the mystery early, you have to have a reason to do it, and it's got to be able to go somewhere from there. I mean, that's one of the tricks. Don't write yourself into a corner. And that really is important. You really have to be careful, and that's the beauty, once again, of being able to look at it in outline form. You can see where, oh my God, where am I going to go from here? There will be a couple of times, maybe once or twice when I write the outline, where literally all I do is write twists. It went here, I'm going to take it here, okay? It went here, too expected, I'm going to take it here. And what does that do to the whole story, okay? And sometimes a twist, it changes everything. But better to do that at the outline stage than 80 pages into the book. You're not going to wake up 6 months into the process and go, oh shit, man, I wrote myself into a terrible corner. I'm dead. I got to throw out 6 months worth of work. When you read about writers all the time, and it happens occasionally, but it shouldn't happen much, especially with commercial fiction. You should not have to throw out 6 months worth of work, and it happens, and or it's not working. Oh my God, it's not working. Well, if you spent more time with the outline, even if it's an extra month, so what? When I do the outlines and even the manuscripts, I will put notes to myself all the time, or if I'm writing with somebody, notes to the co-writer. Things that I think are essential to make that scene work. If I don't get that part right, or if we don't get that part right, the scene isn't going to work. I will not write a note like, with Max in the beginning of Maximum Bride. I'm not going to write things like she needs to be cool and mysterious, because that doesn't help me. What does cool mean? And that's just a cliche that doesn't get me anywhere. So I might write a little note that gives me an idea about why she's cool. Something that she's going to do, or some observation that she's going to have that is just a cool observation. So I might write a little note about that. And sometimes I'll just put that note to myself, that this needs to be scary, or it's not going to work. Not going to work. Or that I need to feel more than I have in the whole book, the relationship between these two people in this chapter, or none of it's going to work. We've been building to things, and along the way, and that should all be 70% of it, 80% of it should be in the outline. Then, and it's not mechanical, because that's creative. That is a book. It is a book called an outline. And if that book is great, you ought to be able to sell your outline to a publisher if it's done the way it should be done. One way to break down your outline is what happens to that character through the length of the story. What happens to this character through the length of the story? What happens to this character? And are those plot lines interesting? Am I interested not just in, okay, they're going to find out who's killing old women in San Francisco, not just that, but why am I interested in that person in addition to the fact that he or she is solving this crime? What happens to them? In the Women's Murder Club novels, invariably there are 2 or 3 crimes being dealt with in every novel. So there are 3 crimes to follow, and hopefully they're all fascinating and different and things you haven't read about before. And then we have the 4 main characters and what's happening in their lives. So what's happening with Lindsay? Oh, Lindsay's gonna have a baby. Holy shit! After all these years, Yuki is still a lunatic and unable to get out of her own way in a lot of ways. So that's a continuing, and you want those characters to change, and you want conflict to come into how they're handling life as well. You should be able to read the outline and just go, I get this book. I see how it flows. I understand why these characters are going to be interesting to me. I feel the twists. And then, as you write it, hopefully it gets even better. Only my editor has seen this outline before, so I'm sharing something with you that I haven't shared before. And what happens in this outline, and why it's important for you to listen to this, is the first couple of chapters really set up the third chapter. And without the first couple of chapters, the third chapter wouldn't even work. So this is also an example of how you set things up in a book. In the first chapter, Nora Sinclair is packing for a business trip, and we hear a voice over her shoulder, and it's Gordon Brown, who is her lover. And he's kind of a boyish 40, she's sort of 35-ish. And he tells her, you travel too much, because she's going off on this business trip. And we like them together, and it's important that this is written that way. And even it's important that the outline stresses the fact that we have to really like them together. We have to love them together. We have to go, we're in love because they're in love when we read this chapter. It makes us feel terrific. In the second chapter, they're having a lunch. And it's a really neat lunch in Gordon's house. And Gordon says he's never been happier, and Nora laughs and she says, "Is that your idea of a proposal?" And Gordon says, "No, this is." And he reaches into the pocket of his robe. He removes a small Tiffany box, or maybe a good-sized Tiffany box, and he gets down on one knee and he proposes to Nora. And we want them to be together. We love them. They are a terrific couple. We wish that we were with somebody like that. Third chapter, Nora is off on this business trip. Same day, later that afternoon, she arrives at this spectacular brownstone in Boston. On the doorstep, she removes Gordon's engagement ring. And as a reader, we're going, what the hell is going on here? She puts on another engagement ring. She lets herself inside. She has the key. She calls out, "Honey, I'm home." And we realize that she's engaged to two men, okay? So we are hooked as readers. And once again, we're playing this cat and mouse game with our readers. And they love this. They want to play cat and mouse. That's why they're in the other chair. The outline is the most creative of all of the disciplines. That's where your imagination is going crazy. And you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to put in stuff that's like, oh, that's just too much. And once again, as you read it, if you're being honest with you, I took it too far there. And you may find at times that, as good as you tried to make the outline be, that it started losing drama in a certain place. It just started being repetitive. I mean, and that happens a lot of times. And that's just a little bit your imagination leaving you for a while, and you start repeating. And that, I mean, that happens a lot when you're writing. And all of a sudden, we already heard that, or you just keep repeating sort of the plot points, or and you need to be conscious of stuff like that too. But the outline needs to change, as you write the book. It needs to grow. It needs to have vitality. It needs to expand and contract at times. Everything that I'm telling you, I have gone through. Okay? I have gone through where the outline isn't working. I've thrown out occasionally outlines. I'm constantly dealing with chapters that aren't working and reworking them. Now, what I like to do, I mentioned this thing about write the story down, just keep going, don't stop. Even if you have to in some chapters, just go TBD, move on. You're stuck, get it the next time around. I like to write several drafts. I'll write 5, 6 drafts. The greater the challenge, the more impossible it seems, the better chance is that it's really going to be something fresh. Because it's like, this is impossible. Oh, no, it ain't. I can do this. And in doing it, you write something like that nothing's been written that way before, because nobody would be that stupid to try to solve those problems except for you and me. We're dumb. Well, that's how we get rich, by being dumb. Now you got the skeleton. we can work with the skeleton, and if the outline is right, that skeleton will not have a leg coming out of its head and another leg coming out of this and an arm. That's a bad skeleton, okay? If the outline is right, you're going to have a skeleton that is correct, anatomically correct, and you can really go from there. Once you have your outline and you've read it and you know it's really percolating for you, and maybe you've had a couple of people read it and they're going, I love this story. And they should be able to read it and really get the story. But once you have the outline, start writing, dude. Start writing. You're ready. You're ready to start. This is the enemy, the blank page. This is the, oh my God. And you'll see this so often in the movies. And I think a lot of screenwriters are frustrated novelists. And you've seen this 50 times in the movies, and that shouldn't happen. That's just to me bad writing, where they write the first line and then they cross it out, and they write the first line again, and they cross it out, and they write the first line again. And I've seen that literally a dozen times. But there is a reality to it, which is that blank page is troubling. Every author has a different approach, or many authors have a different approach. But I really recommend just freight train through that first draft, get that story down. Apparently, I guess Raymond Chandler had that process. I have that process. A lot of writers have that process. Get it down. I've seen writers who can write that first draft in a month. I can do the first draft in a month. At certain times, it's just flowing. And I'm not sure, I don't know if it's health related. I have no idea why, but sometimes it's just flowing and it's working and I can't write enough. And I'm amazed at how much I do in a very short period of time. And then there are times when I'll sit there and I'll write chapters and I'll go, it's all coming out flat for some reason. It's all coming out flat. And eventually something hits me and I go, okay, and I'll go back and polish the stuff and suddenly raise the level. I don't know why that happens, but it just seems to, it's certainly part of my process. Don't have blocks. Partly because if I'm not getting it, and I know I'll just put TBD and I get it on the next draft, which is a useful and smart thing to do. Do not torture yourself. Just go, I'll get it, and be confident that you'll get it. That's how people get blocked. They get to a point and it's like, oh my God, I can't get this chapter, I can't, and then you start obsessing on it and it's not coming and you get worried and you get nervous and you get panicked. It's sort of like these things, I guess, that some couples go through when they can't get pregnant. They start pressing too hard and the mind starts getting tight and, it doesn't work. It's like, you're trying to do a sport and you get all tense. That's not going to work. You're going to strike out. So if you're not getting it, move on, get it the next time, or get it the time after that. I mean, I've had times when I've gone through where that TBD would be on 3 or 4 chapters for a couple of drafts. I write 7 days a week. I get up early in the morning. I'll very quickly go through 2 or 3 newspapers, have a cup of coffee, and I'll go through those in 15 minutes. I have my little paths through the newspapers in terms of, the things that I always, want to read about. And then I start writing, whether it's outlining or whatever, book I might be working on. Pencil, I write in pencil. I do not write on the computer. I'm not suggesting that anybody do that. I write on a yellow legal pad. I write on every other line. I have an assistant who's now legally blind from trying to read my handwriting. She will type up stuff, send it back to me. Once I get it typed up, it will be triple spaced. I write between the lines. When I'll do a second draft, when I write between the lines, and when I'm going over that draft, I only read what I just wrote. I assume that everything that I left there is just fine, which means that I can kind of do a second draft of that draft in no time. I frequently then will go out, this is just my own nuttiness, and I admit this, and this is just to show that I am a flawed character with dark secrets. I will go out and walk a golf course for an hour 15 minutes, a lot of mornings. I have no thoughts about writing. I walk. I chase a little white ball. I curse the little white ball. Occasionally, I praise the little white ball. Rarely. I come back and I write. I'm refreshed. I've had a nice walk. It's good for my health. I write some more. I'll write until lunchtime. 6 days a week, I'll have lunch with my wife. I love my wife. I like being with my wife. I'll come back and write some more. And I pretty much do that every day. I have always been able to I can sit here, I could stop what I'm doing here and just start writing. I've always been able to do that, to just tune out the world. And I think part of that is because I just love it so much. And I've always been able to focus on what I'm doing in a very powerful way. So, I don't know where you come from. You're going to have to figure that out. But it's useful if you can write anywhere, on a plane. You can just tune it out and focus and concentrate. And I guess you just do what you can to try to practice that. Practice your skills of concentration, because it's not just a matter of being able to write anywhere. It's really, what you're really honing there is your ability to concentrate. And, more and more now, we have a world where, people want to do 2 or 3, 4 things at a time. And they'll actually do advertisements on television on, oh, isn't this great? You can do 2 things at one time. I don't believe that. I don't believe people do 2 things well at one time. You certainly are not going to write well while doing something else, in my opinion. So if you're writing and playing with games, it's just not going to, and the more you do that, the less, I think it lessens your ability to concentrate. So however you can do it, and part of it is just being able to just, in the middle, anything, be able to write no matter where you are. But I think the most important thing is that you're learning how to concentrate better, how to focus better. You need to focus. You need to get in touch, because when you're focusing and concentrating, you're actually getting farther and farther into your story. You're more in touch with it, and you got to get into it. I think sometimes if I do go through a period where it's not happening, I think it's because my concentration is not working as well, and I'm not in the scene. I'm not there. I'm not aware of who that character is or who those characters are, I'm just not into it. And that's just a matter of concentration and focus. I've said it before, for me, I don't work for a living, I play for a living. So, I'm writing 7 days a week. I love it. So I never, want to be away from it. I don't want to stop. But if you need a break, take a break. I mean, if you're feeling like, man, you're overloaded, take off for a week. Just don't do it. Do something else. Stop. Because it is important. If you're getting a little neurotic about the thing, you just have to just turn it off. Put your mind somewhere else. Stop the neuroses from happening, the pressure, whatever you're doing to yourself. And I would just go to the movies. I would go to the movies, almost every afternoon. Sometimes I'd see the same movie 2 or 3 times. Sometimes I would go watch a movie for an hour that I was kind of enjoying and leave, just because I felt like I don't want to be here anymore. I want to go back and write. And sometimes I would go back and try to and watch the second half like the next day. But if you're overloaded, and it can happen, and it probably will happen, sometimes you just got to walk away for a little bit. Let's face it, I'm not writing War and Peace. I'm not writing Ulysses. But, I always try to do the best I can possibly do. When I used to be in advertising, I think this relates to a lot of jobs, that I was, running a big group. And I would say, look, let's face it, this is ridiculous, okay? We're writing commercials about Ford cars or Burger King burgers or Toys R Us kids or whatever. And it's kind of a dopey thing to do. But I'll tell you what, if you make this little film, and it's a really good film, at the end of the week, you're going to feel pretty good. If you condescend to it or don't give it your best, at the end of the week, you're going to feel like shit, you know? Would you rather feel pretty good, or are you going to rather feel crummy? If you say pretty good, then really give it everything you got. So don't condescend to the genre, because chances are, most of the people watching are never going to be good enough to do the genre. You got to aim for the stars with this stuff. Even if it isn't that good yet, it's okay. You're learning. You're putting in your 10,000 hours. Not that that's a magical number, but you're practicing. You're getting. When I'll go to school with little kids, sometimes I'll go, "Who likes soccer? Yay, we like soccer." Are you better now than 3 years ago? We're better now. Yay! How come? Because you play a lot. It's the same thing with learning how to read. Same thing with writing. The more you do it, up to a point, the better you get. You have to get to a certain level. And when you get to that level, I think it becomes a very joyful experience. At least for me, it always was. And it's a high. It's just a high. It was a high when I was younger, and it still is. If you write something mediocre, chances are it's not going to get published. Now, how does it not become mediocre? It becomes not mediocre because, A, you have just this tremendous idea, and we've talked about ideas and how some of them really rise above the pack, or you've created these characters, or a character who's just so fresh and involving, and just the way they look at the world. I mean, that's really what it is. It's the way they see the world. And you really want your readers to have strong feelings about your characters. You want them to love that character, or you want them to want that character to somehow pull themselves up somehow, or you want to hate that character. But you're not going to do it unless you create characters that really make an impression on them, make them feel. What goes into creating a character? What goes into a human being? What goes into me? What goes into you? What are the parts? One of the things that's useful, I think, is just think of anybody you've met, anybody in your life that you find interesting. Why is that? Are you a religious person? If you're not, what are you? Are you a spiritual person? How does that affect how you conduct your life? Do you have any physical attributes that are important? Are you 70 pounds overweight? What does that mean to how you conduct your life, your internal life, and your the way you deal with the world? Pretty much everybody you meet, if you just start writing down all their little tics and all the things they do, and that's what makes them who they are. And there's kind of an infinite number of things. I mean, there really are. And that's the challenge of it. What fits your main characters? What are that are relevant to your story? You just want to make it as tight as you can in terms of those talents really making that story stronger and stronger and stronger. And you just keep more and more attributes and things that the characters do. And eventually, and that's also an aha moment, and also very joyful when you figure out something about that character that's exactly right. And what you're going to find out is you're starting to understand your own character. As I say, I don't write realism, but I've had hundreds, maybe thousands of policemen and FBI people go, "You got it right." And I think what they mean by that is not that I got all the details right, but I got the spirit of it right. I have the feeling for what it's like to be a cop and out there doing a very difficult job that a lot of people don't understand how hard that is, and then how hard it is to leave it behind and go home and try to be a father or a husband or a wife, or whatever that particular cop is. So I get the emotional part right, and that gets me over a lot of bumps. Talking about Michael Bennett and one of his kids who goes out and is robbing stores. One, the scenes with this kid who's been brought up really well, him going out and robbing a store, that's big. And you need to be able to put yourself in the head of that kid what goes through the head, what goes through the mind of a young kid who's been brought up well. His father's a cop. He doesn't have big problems with his father, but where he came from is maybe an issue because he's adopted. But what goes through that kid's head? What goes through anybody's head when they walk into a store and rob it? But this is a kid who's never, so how do you capture that? How do you make that come alive? How do you make that believable? But more than anything, how do you get in that character's head so you feel it? You got to put yourself there. I mean, that's one of the things. I will write in one of my drafts, I'll maybe half the chapters, I'll just put be there at the top of the chapter. And that means you got to be in that scene. You need to experience it like that character, or it ain't going to be any good. It's useful to ask yourself, if someone was drowning in the ocean, would you really go in and save them? Or if your character is put in a position where they have to save somebody in the ocean, what kind of complexity? Is there complexity? Is it just a reflex thing with them? If it is a reflex thing, do they get halfway out there and going like, what the hell am I doing? How am I going to handle this? Do I have the skill to save this person? You want it to be complicated. You want to be able to put the reader there in the real world. No bullshit. I think you need to capture the complexity of that, or it just isn't terribly interesting. I think that you would have second thoughts about going into the ocean to try to save somebody, because your own life, for real, be there. Get it, your own life is in jeopardy. It's difficult, not impossible, but difficult to create a hero that you want to read about page after page after page if there isn't some complexity. So for example, in my private series, Jack is he's quite bright, but his family background, his father's been to jail. He has a terrible relationship with his father. He's been in the Army. He did something that in the Army, a helicopter went down, and a lot of us would think that what he did is heroic in that he saved a couple of people from the helicopter, but he also left somebody in the helicopter. So he considers that a shameful, something he just can't get past. Even though most of us would look at what he did as heroic, he doesn't believe that. So, and that's a good flaw in that we're kind of on his side, but he's not on his own side. And we kind of want to shake him and go, Jack, it's okay. You did the best you could. You did a great thing. I don't know that I would have gone in the burning helicopter the first time or the second time. And the fact that you didn't go in the third time, it's okay. You did, as we humans go, that you did very well. But that he cannot escape that. It just continues to be something that troubles him through his life. I think that one of the things that that really gets people is when you have a character that seems one way, like they're very sort of hard, and then all of a sudden you see another side of them, and you go, oh, okay, he's a tough guy, but he's a sweetheart too. And I think when you see that other side, with an Alex Cross or a Kay Scarpetta, Patricia Cornwell's lead character, and Scarpetta, can really be a jerk at times. And then every once in a while, she just reveals herself as such a sweetheart. And you go like, oh, I kind of like her. So and that was part of the thing with House, the TV series, where, he's just so nasty and unpleasant. But every once in a while, you just got to kind of glance. And it was much more subtle with House. It could just be a look with him, where you just kind of go, you know what, he's sort of thinking a human thought there. He didn't even say anything, but you can see it in his eyes. But I think that seeing the other side of the character, or just more complexity, rounded characters they'll talk about. Characters that they have a lot of sides. They're complex. You feel you're meeting the full person. Okay, the area of villains. What makes a worthy opponent for Alex Cross or Lindsay Boxer? Uh, um, and I think that they need to be, if not very smart, at least very clever. They need to be able to surprise you. And I don't know. I mean, I don't think that's terribly realistic, but it certainly makes for more interesting reading. That the villain keeps surprising you. I didn't see that coming is a good thing in these kinds of books. I think that it's really useful if you can the more you humanize these characters, the better. Readers and viewers are peculiar in the sense that, like, you watch a movie, Silence of the Lambs, okay? At the end, we have this guy who was running the prison, who really, I mean, he hasn't done anything really bad. He was unpleasant to Hannibal Lecter, and he was a little, kind of odd with Foster. But, he hasn't really done anything awful. At the end of the movie, Hannibal Lecter is sort of, you get the sense he's going to chase this guy off into the jungle and eat him, and the audience cheers. What is that all about? Seriously, you're cheering for the serial killer that's going to go kill this prison official. It's not like the guy had done anything really awful. And, so and that's interesting to me also, the ethics and morals of readers and how they sort of fade away if they're really digging the characters. I had one villain who was a terrible murderer, and he was a house husband. And from the point of view of the wife and his kids, he's a neat guy, good father, blah, 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 blah. They had no idea about the secret life that this guy had and the kind of fantasies that drove at least part of his life. And that's interesting to me when you have, there's complexity. When you have a house husband, and for all intents and purposes, he's a good person. But a lot of times in novels, you get those sort of cartoonish characters, and they're not complex, and they're not interesting. And that's another one where you just want to put the book down immediately. A lot of the subsidiary characters are not necessarily so subsidiary. Alex Cross's grandmother, Nana Mama, is vital to the book in that she's seen Alex right from the get-go. She saw him when he was an orphan. She brought him up. She's dealt with the good and the bad. She's seen where he's gone from a little bit of troubled life in Washington on to an important college, into the police force. I have had threats from readers, many threats, that Nana Mama must not die. Nana Mama is in her mid-90s now. I have no choice. She will probably live longer than I will. Michael Bennett has 10 kids, Michael Bennett, the cop. And that creates its own sort of impossible situation to write about, but that's what makes it fun, and that's what makes it a challenge. And one of the challenges is to introduce these kids slowly. You can really, you know that they're all there and you know tidbits about them, but certain books you can really highlight one of the kids, like Brian, who's 15, and one of Michael's, he's really close with Brian. Brian's going to get into a lot of trouble in the book I'm writing now. Jane is 14, and she's very goofy and loving, and she actually, writes a diary about her life in this crazy family with 10 adopted kids, and that's kind of charming. So, a lot of these subsidiary characters become, hugely important, and they're part of what drives the book forward. And anytime I'm going to write an outline, one of the things I'll always do, okay, what's happening to the family, let's say in a Michael Bennett or an Alex Cross book in this book. And you have to be careful with the pets, because people get ridiculously attached to the pets. Even the Bennett family. Do not hurt Saki the cat. Do not hurt Jasper the sheepdog. Do not hurt Puddles the hamster. They must not die. What's going to happen in your book is that your readers, they're actually going to find out more about your character than they probably know about anybody in their life. They will know more about your character by the end of the book than some husbands know about their wives in terms of their histories, in terms of how they think, or that wives know about their husbands. So it's a very intimate relationship that you're gonna, and that's one of the reasons that people love novels. But that's what you have to do. You have to create that character that they're not going to forget. I don't mean it's going to be the most important person in their life, but I never forgot the character because I got to know them so well through the talent of the writer. I don't want to overstress the importance of first lines. It's just that they can really give you an advantage. You're reaching out from that book, grabbing a hold of that reader and sucking them right into your book, or not. And if you pull them right in, you've got them. You've got that agent, you've got that editor, you've got your reader. Suck them right in. And insofar as if they're staying right there and you haven't pulled them at all, you probably have lost them. If you get them this far, that's probably good too. Okay, there, I'm leaning with you. So far so good. So far so good works. Okay, that's okay. If the reader's going, okay, yeah, what happens next? I'm cool with it. And sometimes it is just like, boom, I am in, hook, line, and sinker. And that's the best, especially trying to sell that first novel. Here we are again, the dreaded first page. What to do about it? A really terrific sports writer named Red Smith, and he said, writing is easy. All you do is stare at a blank piece of paper until drops of blood form on your forehead. So that's kind of what that first page is about. Obviously one of the keys is just the first line. Along came a spider. First Alice Cross book starts early on the morning of December 21st, 1992. I was a picture of contentment on the sun porch of our house on 5th Street in Washington, D.C. That was my first line. Yeah, it gives you a lot of information. Not a great first line, but I'm so far I'm okay. I'm getting into it. You've Been Warned, which was a horror book. First line there in the prologue, it's way too early in the morning for dead people. Once again, give me an idea of what kind of book it is. Private series about a private investigation company and a relatively young guy that runs it. And the first line is, to the best of my understandably shaky recollection, the first time I died, it went something like this. That's a pretty cool first line, actually, if I do give myself some credit. In Kiss the Girls, the first line is, for 3 weeks, the young killer actually lived inside the walls of an extraordinary 15-room beach house. For me, I'm there. The idea of somebody living in my house, a killer, inside the walls, and what you'll find out in the next couple of chapters is that people are in the house while he's living inside the walls. That's very dramatic. It's very scary. It would scare the pants out of most readers, and if it happened in real life, it would really scare the hell out of you. I always feel that if I haven't given them something in the first chapter, it's bad news. I have to have grabbed them a bit. Maximum Ride, once again, in terms of what you can do in a scene. We open up with children, and they range from 7 years old to 14 or 15. They're running like banshees. They're escaping from a building. You don't exactly know what kind of a building, only whatever was happening in that building is very, very bad. The narrator is this girl, Max. She's a feisty girl. She has dark humor. She's very concerned for her friends who are running with her. She's particularly concerned with the 7 and 9-year-olds. And you're wondering, what the hell happened in that building? Why are they running away? You hear that there are dogs chasing them and adults chasing them, and they get to a cliff, and you go, oh my God, here we go with the cliffs, and they're going to jump into water or something. Well, there's no water. It's just a disaster. So basically, you set up a dilemma for the reader and for these kids. I mean, what's going to happen now? They're cooked. They're caught. The dogs, the adults, and all of a sudden, out come the wings, and they fly. They jump off the cliffs and they fly. What happens in that scene? One, it's thrilling in itself. It's a very the chase is thrilling. Two, you're getting exposed to the narrator's voice, and that voice is one that you like hearing. You like the way she's telling her story. It's not just total panic. It's you feel that she maintains a certain control and confidence, and you're wondering, like, why is she feeling that? Why is she feeling this confidence? Why does she feel that all these kids can possibly get away from these dogs and the guards? And certainly when they get to the cliff, and she still seems confident. And then you get this very unexpected surprise and release with the wings and flying. Actually, what happens in the chapter is they dive off first, so it almost feels like a mass suicide, and then the wings come out, which is even more effective. If you're going to kill somebody off in the first chapter, which happens frequently, ideally what you want to do is you want to write that character as though it was the hero of your book. You want people so goddamn interested in it that when they die, it's like, you're kidding me. That character was so interesting. I can't believe that the author killed that character off, because I was really interested in that character. What he or she was going to do. And a lot of times, that murder victim, and same in television, you have not involved in the character at all. Somebody in jeopardy, they run up the stairs, they run to the roof. You don't know who the hell they are. You don't really care. And they get thrown off the roof, and you're like, okay, not good, not good. You got to invest me in that person running up the stairs. If that's what you're going to start with a murder. I need to be interested in that character. Man, I mean, there's so many books that I read and so many manuscripts where I just read, I'll read the first couple of pages of the first chapter, and I go like, this does not work at all. There's no tension, there's no style, there's nothing to get me interested in this thing. The writing is it's either overwritten or underwritten. I have no interest in the character. The action feels cliched. Nothing happened in that first chapter that's of any interest to me in any way, shape, or form. Anybody telling you a story, I mean, you do it all the time. Somebody will be telling you a story, and you want to walk away after the first 3 sentences. It's like, okay, I go to the bathroom now, or or a typical thing, or at a party like that, and you see the person like looking over your shoulder to see who's coming in the door, then they're just not buying into your story. You don't want to just be dropping all the information you think you need to drop. You need to be involving me. I mean, one, in the scene. Where am I in a line or two, and that I want to be there. That's one of Grisham's strengths. Is that he's very good in that first chapter or two in getting you really involved with that main character, setting up some kind of a conflict for that character, and putting you in a scene. Putting you in a scene. 2 boys are going off to sneak a couple of smokes. They're 8 and 10 years old, or however old they are. And you're with them, and you're following them, and you can feel, oh yeah, right, I've been there. I've sneaked off to do something, whether it's smoking or whatever the heck it is, and you're involved, and and then they see something they shouldn't see, which raises the stakes. They're little kids, and they just saw something they shouldn't see, and so I'm involved. Suspense, and I'll say this over and over again, it's about questions the reader must have answered, must have answered. All the time, every book will rewrite that first chapter over and over again, and rewrite that first line frequently. Not all the time, but frequently. I mean, I'm just doing a book Humans Bow Down, and I've rewritten that chapter 5 times already, and it's been a different first line every time. So, and because I need to feel as involved as I want the reader to feel. I want to read that next chapter. I want to read about that character. I got the conflict already. I'm feeling it. All of your key interchanges with your characters, I mean, they're going to be good, bad, or indifferent just because of the dialogue. And how they talk to each other is going to reveal a lot about who they are. Who's smarter, who's taking advantage of who's lying, who's telling the truth, who's in charge, who's really in charge. Richard Price in Lush Life, you can see when he's just winging this stuff. And in this scene, it's cops on patrol, and they're following a car. And the one cop says, "What do we got?" And the other cop says, "2 males in front seat." And the cop says, "What do we got?" He's asking for more. And the next cop says, neon trim on the plate, tinted windows, front passenger just stuffed something under the seat. And the other cop says, "Thank you." And then this one cop, Lugo, hits the misery lights, the lights over, and the cop car climbs up on the Honda's rear. And these 2 cops, Daly and Lugo, slow walk up on the other side of the stopped car. And the driver is a Latin guy. And the guy says, "Officer, what'd I do?" And the cop says, "License and registration, please." And the driver goes, for real, what'd I do?" And the cop says, "You always drive like that?" And this Latin guy goes, "Like what?" And the cop says, "Signaling lane changes, all road courteous and shit." And the poor Latin guy goes, "Excuse me?" And the cop goes, "Come on, nobody does that unless they're nervous about something." And then the poor Latin guy goes, "Well, I was." And the cop goes, "Nervous?" And the poor Latin guy goes, "You was following me." And the cop goes, "A cab was following you?" And the Latin guy goes, yeah, okay, a cab. All serious, officer, and no disrespect intended. Maybe I can learn something here, but what did I do? And the cop goes, "Primary, you have neon trim on your plates." And the Latin guy, still confused, goes, "Hey, I didn't put it there. This is my sister's whip." And the cop goes, "Secondary, your windows are too dark." And the Latin guy goes, I told her about that." And the cop goes, "Tertiary, you crossed the solid line." And the Latin guy goes, "To get around a double parked car." And the cop goes, "Quadrary, you're sitting by a hydrant." And the Latin guy, "That's because you just pulled me over." Okay, so there's a wonderful, wonderful bit of dialogue in terms of poor guy getting pulled over, have done nothing. And it's very comedic and it's tragicomic, and it's just wonderful. And that, if you can write stuff like that, you're going to make a lot of money, and you don't need my advice. But that's great dialogue. My style, it isn't realism, it's heightened. It's stuff is it's funnier or wittier or more dramatic than what people would really say in real life. But it feels real. It feels real. And then sometimes you'll have stuff that really is very realistic. I think the real super realistic dialogue is generally you wouldn't want to read. I wouldn't want to read a lot of it. There's a couple things you have to be careful of when you're writing realistic dialogue. One is it tends to be boring, and you're not going to get any points because, boy, that sounded just like it happens at our breakfast table every morning. Mostly people don't care about that because they actually can experience that for free at their breakfast table. So that's not enough. And you need to pick that one conversation at the breakfast table where there was something in it that made it really interesting and really moved your story ahead. One of the reasons that I like kooky characters is that they say kooky things. When I loved it. I like it when you don't know you don't know what they're going to say, or at least one of even if it's two people, and if you get a squirrely like in Invisible, where Emmy is you just don't know what the hell she's going to say. She is a total loose cannon. A loose cannon in the FBI is really not tolerated, but there she is, and her boss is prickly. And so anytime she's in there, it's like, is she going to light the bomb? Is she going to, just tee him off? And she is. And you're waiting for her to tee him off. And you watch it develop through dialogue. You can just see it coming, and you want it to come. And you don't, what's unexpected about her is not that she's going to tee him off, but the way she does it, which is either willful or accidental. And it can go either way, and both ways are interesting. She can be so caught up in her own craziness that she doesn't even know that she's doing it, but she's doing it, and the boss knows she's doing it. Or, in another case, it can be very willful, where she just, somewhere in the dialogue, you can just feel that she's had enough of this guy, and she's just going to torture the shit out of him, Different writers have different feelings about how much you attribute the conversation to somebody, Larry said, or more colorful stuff. And that's really your choice. I mean, Elmore Leonard kept it very simple. He's a great dialogue writer. He didn't really want to put in a whole lot. Sometimes it can be confusing if you don't identify the speakers occasionally. People start to forget or lose track or what you're writing. Confusion, I don't think, is a good thing for the most part. So you want them to be able to follow the conversation within reason. Sometimes you want those little pieces. I mean, one of the things that makes some movies very effective is somebody says something, and it's the then look on the person's face, who that eye roll or something, or what's in their head. I mean, you don't get that in the movies, but in the books you can. Somebody says something and somebody thinks, what an asshole, as he smiles, whatever. So that's one reason why you might want to break up the dialogue a lot, because you want what one of the characters or both of the characters are thinking to be part of the fabric of that chapter. One of the tricky things you have to be careful of, and you see it in the movies all the time, is where, for the purposes of explaining the plot or how the story, you put words in your characters that they should never say, just because you need to explain something. Try not to do that. They do it in the movies all the time. Here are these two characters, and they ride in the car, and they have this really boring conversation. And they have to have it because they got to explain this technical crap. If it has to be done, if you've got, global situation that needs to be explained, or relationships between countries, or something about computers, or two businesses and how they operate, or the inner workings of NYPD, don't just drop the information. You have to figure, and certainly don't put it into bad dialogue between two characters. That would never happen in a million years. You have to figure out a way. One, what do I need to say? How do I say it in the quickest way? That communication. Sometimes you can filter it over 3 or 4 chapters where you just drop little pieces, or you just figure out a device where you have one character who's basically, I don't want to hear about it. I don't want it. Will you please stop? I don't want to hear about it. Please stop. I don't care. I don't care about Russia and China. Stop. Just a device that, that would make it somewhat comedic or somewhat more palatable. Anytime you're writing, if it's a section of dialogue and you want to go from, 1 hour to an hour later, or whatever, it's as simple as, you don't have to write, the 5 pages of dialogue. You can cut it right off and say, the night continued, and then they talked about whatever the heck it is. You just got to write that one line that gets you there. 10 minutes passed, and then Larry said, that's not the way you do it, but that's the sense of that. Just a transitional line. And some people don't know that simple trick. That's just a simple, it's not enough to just lay out, here is 10 minutes worth of boring. Don't do that. That's not going to work. Similarly, obviously you can skip on days or months or years or whatever. You just need a smooth, a good transition, and you like the transition to be satisfying also. I mean, if you're going to jump ahead 2 years, you'd prefer that it doesn't have to be an italicized 2 years later, which you see all the time. And it's not the end of the world, but if you can make it more palatable to the reader, all to the good. Everything should be moving your story and moving that sense of character forward. So if you're having a piece of dialogue, it's not just to pass the time of day. You're communicating, and everything you write should be moving the story forward and moving the sense of that character forward. You should be learning something about that character, getting more interested. And if it isn't, cross it out. Mike Connolly, he said, what Jim does is every single chapter moves the characterization and the action forward, every chapter, and turns on the movie projector in our heads. And that's, I think, exactly what you want to do. And that movie projector in our heads means that I could see the scene, I could hear the scene, I could smell the scene, I could taste the scene. I was getting enough information that sets me in that scene. So I could be there with the character. And that's really, really useful. Some writers don't write that way, but if you want to write commercial fiction, that's important. I tend most of the time to write in the first person and third person limited. Now, some people will go, well, that's cheating. Well, I don't give a shit what people, I'm allowed to, it's my creation. I can do whatever I want to do. There are no rules. The 11th commandment didn't come down and say, you cannot use the first person and the third person in the same story. Yes, you can. You can do whatever you want to do if it works. So the first person allows, I love to write in the first person, because for some reason it helps me to get in touch with the scene and what the character's thinking. I just find it easier to get in touch, to be there, to be in the scene with Alex Cross or Michael Bennett or Lindsay Boxer or Maximum Rider or any of the characters I've done. The limitation of the first person is obvious, because then if it's all first person, that's the only character you can follow. Because I like to follow the villains frequently, and I like to follow some of the secondary characters, I like to write in the same book in both the first person and limited third person, and you get the best of both worlds. So you can get really in on the first person, but yet you can switch off and write from another character's point of view. One of the things you have to deal with every chapter is whose point of view makes this the most interesting. If it's a crime, is it more interesting from the victim's point of view, the killer's point of view, or the detective's point of view when they come on the scene and see whatever the results of the crime is? What's the best point of view to accomplish whatever you want to accomplish there? So that's where you have to think about, okay, what's going to make this come alive the best? And sometimes, and this happens frequently, I might have in the outline a certain point of view, but when I get to the chapter, I go, you know what? This is going to be better written from another point of view, because that other point of view, just suddenly it just becomes richer and more mysterious, or whatever you wanted that chapter to be, scarier. I mean, you always should have a feeling for emotionally what did you want to have happen in that chapter? What did you want? Did you want the reader to feel something? You want them to feel scared? You want them to feel pity for somebody? You want them to feel sad? What's going to happen? You want them to feel romantic towards somebody? You want it to be sexy? What's going to make it sexy? This thing about building a scene and how you can really accomplish a whole lot in a scene, I think it's the first chapter in First to Die, which is the first of the Women's Murder Club novels. And in this chapter, Lindsay Boxer, our detective, arrives. There's been a murder. There's been a murder of a couple on their honeymoon. So I'm already leaning with you. Okay, how the hell did that happen in this hotel? And now we're introduced to Lindsay Boxer, and we get a feeling that she's, competent, and we like the way she looks at stuff. She's not just competent, she's got a little sense of flair and humor. Then we meet the medical examiner, who once again is another part of this women's murder club, and she would be there. She's the medical examiner, and we see that she and Lindsay have a relationship. And then we meet Jill Bernhardt, who's an assistant district attorney. She's been called to the scene, and that's all logical because assistant district attorneys are often called to murder scenes. So we've met 3 of our key characters already, and it's very credible that they're there. We know that they have a relationship. We actually already know that they like each other and are friendly. And then we get our 4th member of the Women's Murder Club, Cindy Thomas. She's a young reporter. She don't belong there. And she lies her way in and gets in. And so now we have the whole Women's Murder Club together in this first scene of the book. And we know that 3 of them are friends, and we know that one of them doesn't belong there in any way, shape, or form. But by the end of the book, they're going to be a unit. And we've accomplished all of that in our murder scene. So this is good shit. I will often, when I'm writing at least one of the drafts, just put "be there" on the tops of several of the chapters. Be there. And what I'm doing is putting a note to myself to remind myself to be in that scene, because I've got to bring it alive for my reader. And that means visually and from my kind of writing, quickly and succinctly, and for it to ring true emotionally. And so what do we have to work with? We have what we could see and what our perceptions of are, what the person, the protagonist or the villain, whoever is in the environment, what their perception of that space is. We then have the sense of the hearing. What do they hear? If that's relevant, that could be a big thing. It could be silence. It could be a sound that they don't want to hear. It could be sirens coming. We have the sense of smell. Now, obviously, when you get into murder scenes, all of those get elevated. The problem with that is that those murder scenes have been described so many times, and we know about the maggots, and we know about the hideous smell, and we know about the tricks of putting, Vicks in your nose, because I'd rather smell Vicks than what you smell, and so that becomes harder to make the senses as effective as you'd like to be, because so much of it has been done before. And yet it is possible. In the movie Seven, they did a great job of making these horrific scenes visually fresh. The sound was frequently really important. You can really do incredible things with, there are flies, and then there is the sound of flies, which is sometimes worse than actually seeing the flies. So the sound becomes very important in film or even in your book, if you can figure out ways to describe hearing a sound, not knowing what the hell it is, having never heard it before in your life, or the life of of whoever the protagonist or whoever's hearing it. That can be very effective. What you want to do is something that's fresh, that works, your own thing, make it your own voice. And so what I want to do is I want the scene to catch me a bit. I want the voice, whatever that voice is, I want that to be appealing to me. And that can either be, spectacularly good writing sometimes, great style, or it can just be the way, look, if it's first person, everything that, I'm telling you a story now, so here's my voice, such as it is. Same with your character in your book. And that character, the way they're telling their story, the way they're describing it, what they choose to tell you about is key. So that voice, and usually very early in a book, you can begin to get a feeling, not always, but frequently you can, for that voice. And that voice needs to pull you in. One exercise you can do, and I think this is useful, is take a story in your life that and it's a good story, write it. Just do that. It's a very simple thing. It's the simplest exercise I can think of. Write that story. And now what's going to change that story is the voice. Who's telling me the story? Is it you? Is your voice good? If you don't have a good voice, do you have another voice you can speak in? Can you speak as a woman if you're a male? Can you speak as a man if you're a woman? Can you speak as an African American if you're an ugly white dude? Whatever it is, and you need to play around with that. And it's good if you're a little schizophrenic. When you write scenes, every chapter, it's got to begin with some sharpness. Every chapter, in my opinion, needs to be built around a real dramatic nugget, and it needs to get your attention in some way. It needs to hold it and build it. Build your obviously you should be more involved halfway through the chapter than you were in the first paragraph. The first paragraph's getting you in, but then you should be getting more involved. And at the end, something should happen that propels you onto the next chapter. And in my opinion, the key thing, and maybe the only thing, is setting them up with questions that they must have answered. Obviously, with mystery and suspense, it's all about suspense. It's constant, non-ending fireworks. It's an adventure that starts and it's going to hold you at the edge of your seat right to the end. It starts big, it gets even bigger. What happened? Who done it? And the more questions, the better. If there are 3 or 4 questions in the book, are these two going to get together? Are they going to separate? What's going to happen in this family if you set up family turmoil? Are we going to find the missing child? But it's got to be genuine. If it feels like just somebody throwing in devices, if you feel the manipulation, you lose them there too. If the reader's going, this is just crap, this is just the usual, somebody's trying to manipulate me. People kind of want to be manipulated, but they want it done well. If you're going to write something in the genre mystery suspense, I think you kind of got to be aware of what's out there, not to imitate it, to avoid it. Because, one of the things you can do, let's say you don't really write thrillers, but, I know I can do it because I'm smart and, whatever, but I never read any, or I've read 4. There's a good chance you're going to write something that's already been written before. Or it's going to be very similar, or it's going to, and you're going to think it's great. And, 15 years ago, it might have been great. So I think it's really useful to know what's written and not to write stuff like it, to totally avoid it. Okay, I know what's happened in the past. What's a new twist on this? What's a new twist on a murder mystery or a series of robberies, or whatever it is that you decide is going to be fascinating for people to read about, and fresh and new, and you're going to bring some insights to it, and this is a new kind of puzzle. Look, the Da Vinci Code, all that, what was fascinating about that was just the lengths that the writer went in terms of creating this unbelievably complex puzzle. And a lot of people just found that fascinating. And it definitely was unique. I haven't read that kind of complexity in a puzzle that I can think of anyway. It's rare. So it felt very fresh to people. And one of the things with suspense is, in my opinion, one of the biggest secrets of suspense is setting up questions that the reader must have answered. Must. There's just no way. And in my books, I try to do a lot of those. When I did the first Michael Bennett, Step on a Crack, you start thinking about everything that's going on early in that book. One, which I think is really a tremendous hook for a story, there's one of these state funerals where all these leaders come from all over the place, and they're in St. Patrick's Cathedral, and somebody holds up the cathedral. That, to me, imagine that happening in real life. That's like it makes OJ seem like a little baby tale. I mean, you're kidding me. The president, the vice president, president of France, they're all trapped in St. Patrick's Cathedral. So that's a really cool hook to me. And then where's it going to go? Who's doing it? How do they plan to get away with it? So that's a piece of it. Then we introduce this Michael Bennett. Michael Bennett, and once again, I don't write realism, but it's an interesting, and I get away with it because I make Bennett so believable as a character. But Bennett has 10 adopted children. Holy shit. And he's detective, and he's involved with this takeover of St. Patrick's Cathedral on that particular day. And his wife is dying. I mean, this is insane, and it's ridiculous. I mean, as I say it, it sounds ridiculous, but as a story, a certain kind of story, not realistic page turn that you're going to make believable. I mean, I'm all totally hooked into this thing. What's with the 10 kids? How can that happen? And I like the kids. I like the way he reacts to the kids. And how does he find time in the course of these 2 or 3 days where they're holding all these captives to stay in touch and also stay in touch with his wife who's dying of cancer in New York Hospital? And how do you make, I mean, I think a lot of writing professors would go, don't do it, don't write that story. To me, that was a tremendous challenge in terms of, no, I can do this. I can turn this into a coherent, kind of believable, if you're willing to go along, suspend disbelief, because chapter by chapter, I'm like, okay, I'm buying it. If I step back and tell you the whole story, you go, oh my God, I actually try to pull that off? I go, yeah, I am. You have the whole issue of stakes. What are the stakes in this thing? I mean, all of the good mystery writers are good at hooking you into that story, hooking you into that character, getting you interested right away, having you feel that you're in the scene with that character, and you love the way they're perceiving this room or a bar or an alleyway or the tenement that they have to go up to find somebody on the 8th floor or whatever. And then once that hook is set, it's just the surprises, the twists that keep happening. Cross My Heart and Hope to Die, we have the stakes of Alex Cross's family. The whole family goes missing. We think they're dead. Alex thinks they may be dead, but he's got a tiny little bit of hope, and there's the stakes. And if he didn't have a tiny bit of hope, the stakes are, there's no stakes anymore. He must have that, and the fact that it's just a sliver makes it even more delicious. So anytime I'm feeling that I'm lagging, I'm building in another, even if it's a red herring or some misdirection or Cross goes down the wrong path, that creates some new questions that the reader, oh my God, well, how can that be? Well, that may or may not be accurate because as a detective, he's going down some blind alleys. But that blind alley might really drive the reader crazy in terms of, oh my God, how can it be down that alley? Because I didn't see it coming, and I can't imagine how that's going to lead to a solution. It's very logical and realistic for your detective or protagonist or whatever to go down wrong alleys. They do it. That's what police work is all about. And sometimes in going down those wrong alleys, you create possibilities in the reader's mind that really make the book a lot more interesting. I mean, you can chase the wrong thing, and it's fascinating for the reader because that possibility hadn't really occurred to them. And one of the things you have to be very careful of is even when you're taking them down a wrong path, that it's not one where they go, oh, I get it figured out, I don't want to read it, I don't need to read anymore. That's death, mostly. I got it figured out. Close the book. Very unsatisfying. We get a series of questions, or sometimes just one or two questions that the reader must have answered or the viewer must have answered. And ideally, what you definitely don't want to do is give away the answer very quickly. The worst thing in the world is you build up this thing, and then you give it away in 2 paragraphs. And the reader goes, what? No, that needs to be a scene. That needs to be a satisfying scene. That needs to, even if it's a pretty good reveal, you got to milk it. You need to milk it. And if you can give away your secret in pieces, even better. Here's the, I don't know what it is, but there's the first clue, and there's another clue, and there's another little tidbit, and there's another little tidbit, and then voila. Now, the trick with that is you just have to be careful and smart about that. You're not giving away something where the reader goes with 40 pages left. Okay, I know exactly where this is going, and I don't care. And sometimes when I'm writing an outline, or even when I'm writing different drafts of the book, I'll write in twists. It went one way in that chapter. Okay, what if it goes this way? And you always want to be open. That's where you come up with cool stuff. You keep thinking the unthinkable. Not necessarily writing the unthinkable, but thinking it. And every once in a while, one of those unthinkable things, you go, you know what? I can do that, and that would be really cool, and I can make it believable. And that will make for a really unusual, satisfying story that people won't be able to put down and that they'll talk about after they finish it. And one of the things I've done at times is I'll do stuff like one of the Women's Murder Club, I knocked her off. And it was like, oh, you're kidding. I don't believe you did that. How could you kill her? And, Jill, we love Jill. And I did it because that was the story. It had to happen there. Two, I didn't like the character that much. And three, I really wanted to set up the notion with my readers that don't assume that anyone is safe. Don't assume anyone's safe. Alex Cross is not safe. He's probably safe, but he might not be. Your ending is usually important because, and this is true in movies and it's true in books, because that's what they walk out of the theater either clapping and cheering and feeling great and spreading the word about the movie or out of their apartments or whatever in terms of the book. And a lot of it has to do with what you did at the ending, how you pulled it all together. The surprise at the end, the surprise that fits, that's appropriate. So you really have to make sure that it is satisfying, or you're going to disappoint people, and you won't get that good word of mouth. You might not get published because there's no ending. It's not just you. It's you and a reader. And I want you to always think about that, because when there's a reader in the process, it's a different thing. The reader's sitting across from you, and you're playing this game. You're playing this cat and mouse game with that reader. And the other important thing about that reader is you have to go for the highest common denominator. I mean, if you're going to write a bestseller, there has to be common denominator. It's got to work for a lot of people, but you want to write for the highest common denominator. That's it's a really good thriller reader. It's a really good mystery reader, because you have to satisfy that person. If you satisfy that person, you're going to satisfy everybody else. It is rare. I'll do the outlines, and I'm preaching outline. I almost never do the ending that's in the outline. I would say, well, at least more than 50% of the time, it's a different ending. Because just in writing the book, so much has changed. So many things have happened. The stakes get bigger and bigger and bigger. The villain gets more interesting. Something may have happened to the hero along the line that was a little unexpected. The ending that I write in the outline is never, and I think part of the problem is the outline is a bit more logical than emotional, and by the time I get to that ending, my emotions are really churning, and I'm always feeling it just needs more. It needs more than this. It just can't be about logic. It has to be logic and emotion. You got to feel something in most cases, certainly in commercial fiction. You should feel something. You should, and whether it's a tragic ending in which you go, oh, no, that can be incredibly effective and appropriate. I can't believe, oh my God, I got to tell people, oh, Jesus, that's good. That's a good thing. Happy ending, once again, that can be terrific if it's honest. Where that reader or the person in the movie is going, oh, shit, man, oh, yeah, baby, that's good. That's a good thing. The ending should be really satisfying, surprising, whatever, but it needs to be appropriate. It's got to flow out of the rest of the book. Set up things that are coming. Okay, all through the book, you're going to be, something's coming. You need to set it up a lot of times for it to really be effective. In Honeymoon, the second chapter had to be set up by the first chapter, meaning that if I hadn't seen that couple and really loved them together, it would not be terrific to have her show up at this next house, honey, I'm home. Okay, so that chapter set up the second chapter in the book. You can be 12 chapters ahead and beginning to set up something that is going to happen at the end of part one, and you should do that. That's going to make it, you might be setting it up a couple times. And even in terms of your ending, you can be setting that up. Now, the trick with setting things up is do not give away clues and hints where right then the reader reads it and goes, oh, okay, I know who it is. That is a disaster. That is endgame. That is total dissatisfaction with the novel and the ending. So the trick is, how do you set it up without giving it away, and misleading them? That's another one of the things you want to be doing. Mislead them. Have them think it's going this way. Now, here's the trick with misleading. You cannot mislead to the point where they go, I got it figured out and I hate it. Okay? You're misleading them, but if in misleading them, they think they figured it out and they go, this sucks. That's no good. That's no good. So much of it is just you being really aware of what you're doing and what the effect of that's going to be on another person. Okay? You're, as I've said, I like to pretend I'm sitting across from somebody, I'm telling them a story. I don't want them to get up till I'm finished. Okay? You have to do the same thing. You're sitting across from somebody, and it's a cat and mouse game. It really is, at least with this kind of commercial fiction. You're playing a game with them. Don't feel bad about it because they chose to sit there. They want to sit there. They want to play cat and mouse with you. They want that experience. That's what they're paying for. They're paying to play cat and mouse with you, and that's what a lot of reviewers don't get. They're sitting there, they want to play the game. They want to play the game of mysteries and puzzles and what's going to happen next, and why did it happen, and is it clever, and is it logical? They want to play that game with you. You got to play it on your side, okay? So you need to be as good or better than they are as a game player. It is a game. What is a satisfying ending? With Along Came a Spider, the ending was not the ending from the outline. But what you had there was you had Alex really falling in love with an FBI agent who turns out to be one of the villains, and there were two villains, one a real madman, and the madman sort of faked insanity, so he goes away to prison, and he will eventually escape from prison. Meanwhile, Jesse gets executed. It's just the irony of the really, really hateful bad guy, kind of, who's going to get away, who's going to skate, and this crashing of Alex's romance, where the person who he's trusted and been in love with is going to get executed. I mean, that's satisfying. I think just because it's just the irony is just so incredible, and the shock is so incredible, and the surprise, and you just go, yeah, boy, I didn't see that coming, and it fits, and holy shit, you know. So that's one way to do it. In terms of your ending, the more artful thing is going to be some ambiguity, some mystery, some something maybe unsettling, and the critics will like it better, and some of your super smart readers will like it better, and then some of the people that really they're in a habit of what they like from the genre are going to like it less. So you got to figure out what's right for you. I mean, just know that that's the reality. Some of the more adventurous readers are going to really like that ambiguity. Critics are going to like the ambiguity. And some of the people that just, I want it to be the way it should be, they're not going to like it. A lot of people had problems with that ending of that first book, which was Alice Cross's family is missing. Sorry. Oh, the spoiler alert. Hold it. Oh, too late. I already told the spoiler alert. Alice Cross's family is missing and presumably dead, which you don't know. And a lot of people said, oh, I can't believe it. You bastard. You're just trying to get us to buy another book. Well, I really wasn't. I felt it was a terrific ending for the thing, to just leave it there. And people are funny, they'll watch television shows and, at the end of the season, the whole cast is in a plane accident and, see you in September. And they go, oh, okay, fine. We'll see you in September. You do it in a book and everybody's bird shit. They're writing letters and they're giving you Fs on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and stuff. You didn't give it an ending. But I just felt it was the right ending, A. And B, I felt I had another 400-page book. So I didn't want to write a 900-page Alice Cross book, which also would have pissed people off. I don't want to read 900 pages. Well, you usually do them. They're 400 to 500 pages. I mean, that's a weird thing of people. They get used to stuff. And that's a genre problem, too. Certain people get in and they expect certain things in the genre. And I don't like to do that. I don't like to give them what they're expecting. But I do some of that anyway. It's just, because I feel it's right for me. Not necessarily because I feel it's right for them. I mean, frequently there'll be an extra ending, or an ending and then an epilogue, which may go a whole different way. People are more forgiving of epilogues for some reason, so you can make that even in a thriller. I mean, one of the tricks with thrillers, good thrillers, is the best thrillers, not only do they have pace and excitement and suspense, but you really get involved with the characters, okay? The so-so thrillers are usually primarily the pace is good and the excitement is pretty good and there's a suspense idea, but you really don't care that much about the characters. Characters are a little stock. But the best thrillers, you really are. I mean, people really are involved with Alice Cross. They're really involved with Lindsay Boxer and the Women's Murder Club. They're involved with Mike Bennett. And that's really important. And that allows you, once you have a series going, you can have the ending to the suspense story, and then you can have an epilogue where Alice just goes back to the family, and you're just happy that they're back together, and it's a sweet scene, and that's cool. That works for everybody. And there, that also gives you that option of one of the endings can be really ambiguous and maybe not even an ending. That bad guy got away because you want to write about that villain again. But there, the readers aren't going to go nuts. They'll accept, as long as that ending, the last one in the book, is something where they can go, okay, yeah, I'm cool with that. Lindsay Boxer had her baby, whatever the hell it is. You saw a movie, what worked, what didn't work. You watch a TV show, what worked, what didn't work. Analyze stuff yourself. I mean, just sit there, every ending you watch, if you felt good about it, why? What happened there that made you feel good about it? And there's I don't think there are any rules. Maybe there are. Maybe somebody's figured out some rules. You got to go to somebody else's class for it. But do study, not to copy the stuff. Don't copy it. But you should be taking notes in your head about what's working, what isn't working. Why did you feel satisfied? Go through anything you can remember. Why did that work for you? What happened there? Now, here's the real secret, okay? to endings, and this is one of these pieces that's worth the price of admission to the class. When it comes to endings, and this can be endings of chapters or the endings of the book, write down everything that could possibly happen. Absolutely everything. I don't care how ridiculous it is. Just keep writing down, this could happen, oh, let me see what else, this could happen. Think through all the characters. Think through everything that's happened in the book. Think through everything that hasn't happened in the book. What could possibly happen here? Bullet after bullet after bullet after bullet. Then pick the most outrageous one of them that makes sense. It's got to make sense. It's got to track with the book. But the most outrageous one is going to be the best one, in my opinion. For me, and for a lot of writers, and I think for most of you, editing, polishing, and I'm talking about what you're doing yourself, not when the book gets to a publishing house. It's the whole ball of wax. It's not writing, it's rewriting, and it's rewriting, and it's rewriting. I like to do many drafts. I've done as many as 9 or 10 drafts, but I do the drafts very quickly. I don't get constipated. I don't get worried. I just keep going. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. And this has been true of whether I'm writing a 400-page book or when I was in advertising doing a 30-second television spot. Write it again, write it again, write it again. Look at it sideways, look at it upside down, turn it around. There's nothing wrong. You should be considering every possibility. The rewriting, there's so many different pieces of it. There is getting the story even better, getting those chapters closer to where you want them to be. You might do that a couple times. It might be 2 months, a month, and a month where you just work on the chapters, or maybe a 2 or 3 month thing where you just work on just getting that scene right. And the first rewrite, I might just be trying to get those chapters, that story, to be more coherent, clearer, just trying to make sure I've really got the heart of it correctly, and that's very important. That's the most important thing. Once again, it's always that same thing of moving the story and characterization forward. And if you keep simple things like that in your head, and I repeat them, but you should repeat them for the rest of your writing life, because that's all it is. And it's unbelievable how quickly you forget that, because there you are in your writing and it's not happening. And you're not realizing that it's the rewriting and the rewriting and the rewriting, and remembering those things about what am I trying to do, trying to hold the reader, and that's it. I mean, now you may get so good that that's just an automatic, but I don't know if that happens with many writers, and that's why you'll find certain writers where every other book seems to be a dud. It seems like they kind of forget it for a whole book. And that happens. I mean, I don't know if I've forgotten it for a whole book, but I certainly have forgotten it for sections but then I'll read it and go like, man, this sucks. This is just not happening. Okay, what did I do wrong here? And invariably, the big thing I did wrong was I'm not moving the thing forward. It's sitting there for 40 pages. It's just sitting there. That does not work. It doesn't work for the reader. What happened? It sat there. It sat there for 50 pages. No. Story can't sit there. Consider not polishing the book until you've written it, at least one draft, because if you don't do it that way, what happens is you'll write all these cool sentences and paragraphs and pages and sometimes chapters that shouldn't be in a book. And you got to cut those fuckers out. And if you love the sentence or you love the paragraph or you love the chapter, you have a lot of trouble cutting it, but it should go. It's almost a discipline of poetry in terms of writing those scenes. You eliminate everything that doesn't really make that scene work, ideally. So if it's supposed to be a fresh, scarier than hell, whatever thing it is, anything that distracts from that is out. The greatest joke in the world, no. Description of the woods that, is what no. If it doesn't really get at that core of what that scene should be, it goes. One of the writers that I work with, Marshall Karp, is very frickin' funny. And when we're working together, one of the tricks there is, if we're into a part of that book where it's supposed to be suspenseful, the funny gets in the way. The funny got to go, because it's diminishing the impact of those chapters. Look, we all fall in love with, we'll start writing something. Oh, this is the most lyrical writing I've ever done. Da 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 da. And you know what? Sometimes it's just boring. You go like, this is, it's really beautifully written, but who cares? It's not that beautifully written, Look, you may be the greatest stylist in the world, and if you are, you can write anything. But if you're not, you should listen to some of the things we're talking about. Everything communicates. Everything communicates. And you just have to be so aware. And that's another thing where that, when you polish, you got to take out stuff that just isn't right on point. The dialogue is a piece of the puzzle, and an important piece of the puzzle in most cases. Occasionally you'll read a book that doesn't have a lot of dialogue in it. I think those are really hard to do. And like the rest of the book, you do need, and I think in particular, edit. Because when you write dialogue, it just tends to flow, I think, for most people. Once you get a conversation going, he said, she said, da 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 da, it'll just kind of flow out. And unlike maybe writing some of the description, which might be a little more of a labor. So it really is important you go back and rewrite it and edit it, and then edit it again and edit it again. Because you just keep taking out lines that either don't ring true or shouldn't be in there in the first place. And sometimes, if you look at a chapter and you go, boy, this thing is really dragging, okay? And one of the things you want to look at is, okay, here's these 3 pages of dialogue, and maybe it should have been a page. I have a relatively short attention span. I like things to happen quickly. I like to get to the point. I like to... in life, I've sort of figured out what I really enjoy doing, so I try to mostly just do that. And I think that is one of the reasons why the stuff that I write is so fast-paced, because I want to just keep it going. I want to, what happens next? What happens next? If you're on a roll and I'm really hooked into this thing, don't let them off. Don't stop. And I see that all the time, even when I co-write. With somebody, and they'll do a draft, and I'm going, oh man, this thing was rolling, and then all of a sudden, why did you have the guy go play the flute for a while? Not now. I'm totally into the story, and suddenly it was like, did you forget how well you have people involved in the story? Writers do that all the time. And pace will pay the electric bills, by the way. If you have books that people can't put down and they keep turning those pages, in England, I think the line I use with my books is the pages turn themselves. It can seem overwhelming until you realize, and this is kind of anything you learn, you need to break it down into parts. The parts are manageable. You can conquer the parts. You can conquer the chapter. You can conquer part 1. You can conquer creating that character and then the next character. But if you try to look at the whole thing, it can be overwhelming. You go, I can't do this. You need to be confident that as you're rewriting, it's a good thing. It's getting better. It's not that you made mistakes. And I think that's an important distinction for you to make. You shouldn't be ringing oh my God, I made all these mistakes. No, you didn't make mistakes. You're just making it better. You're making it better, you're making it better, you're making it better, you're making it tighter. You're getting closer to what it should be. You had a vague image in your heads of what it should be, really vague. And this image is just getting tighter and tighter, and you're getting closer and closer and closer to what the book needs to be. But please don't beat yourself up, and don't think that you're not making mistakes because you have to keep fixing things. That's how it works. some people, they're not comfortable with this idea of co-authors or collaborating, and they think it's a much bigger deal than it is. So here's what I have to say to those people. Lennon and McCartney, Simon and Garfunkel, Stephen King and Peter Straub, Rodgers and Hammerstein, Douglas Preston and Lincoln Child, Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld, Gilbert and Sullivan, Woodward and Bernstein, Joel and Ethan Cohen, Matt Stone and Trey Parker. What's great about working with co-writers is that you got two talents. Collaboration is a good thing. I know we have this thing about the American, we just go out and do everything by ourselves, and that's okay, but collaboration is really good. Combining strengths is really good. What I look for in a co-writer are people who can write convincing scenes, because the outline is going to lay out the scenes. Now, we may add scenes, they may add scenes on their own, which is just fine, but they have to be able to write convincing scenes. We know what it's supposed to do. We knew what that scene in Honeymoon was supposed to do. We knew that it had to make us feel great about both of those main characters. So I'm looking for for people that can do that. Secondly, it has to be people that know that it is a James Patterson novel. It's going to be pacey. It's going to be maybe faster than they would write their own work. It's going to really move along, and that they're comfortable doing that and like doing it, enjoy doing it. All the co-writers, I think, enjoy what they're doing, which is important. I think they look forward to getting up and writing this stuff, and it's important that I make them feel invested enough in each book.
I love working with Jim. The process is terrific. I don't know how it works for other people or if we do it differently, but for me, it's fantastic. He gives me an outline, and I read the outline and I get the story, and then I'm asked to contribute to the outline because, as he says, you got to write this stuff. So I really try to imagine how it's going to go during the length of the book. And I send him back some notes, and then he agrees or disagrees, and then we have a working plan for the entire novel.
And the way that works, for me is they will get the outline. I then try to, I want them involved in terms of contributing to the outline for a couple of reasons. One is they might have some good ideas. And secondly, it invests them in the process. Even if they only add a small amount, it's incredible how they feel invested. And they'll go like, that fixed everything. And maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But the important thing is in their heads, they're invested. One of the things that's interesting about co-writers or even people writing a series, once the voice of the characters are there, you'll find, your basic series might, over the course of the series, have 9, 10, 15 different writers, and they're all capable. Let's say the series is House. They know how House talks. They know how he thinks. They know and they can write that stuff. The hard part is whoever put down that first thing where they've established how House talks and thinks. That's the real hard thing.
The hardest part of any project is finding the voice. How is this book going to talk to you? For instance, when we started working on the iFunny books for middle graders, finding that right voice, like we didn't want to sound like Henny Youngman talking to you, like, hey, boom, boom, here's another joke, because that would get annoying after like 3 pages. So it took us a little while to find Jamie's voice, but once you find that, then you can kind of go off and running.
But once it's down, it apparently is a lot easier for writers to mimic that. So once the series is going, it becomes easier for the writer. They know how Michael Bennett talks and thinks. The way publishers work, I don't really think it's the best. They'll say, go write your book, and then it comes in and they go, oh, gee, this isn't what I was thinking it was going to be, or this isn't what I was looking for, or gee, we got a lot of work to do. I really want to see stuff every couple of weeks.
And I generally write about 10 chapters in a flight. And when I've written the 10 chapters, I send them to Jim. Now, he doesn't use a computer, so it goes first to his assistant, Mary, and then Mary sends it to Jim. Jim reads, and he calls me back the next day, which is so phenomenal. I mean, I just think it's very unusual in a very good way to get such a quick response. And I'm waiting for it. We joke, is it okay to go to the bathroom while we wait? Because Jim might call.
I'm very quick about, I will get pages, and a lot of people can't do this or won't do this. I'm actually reading and taking notes as I go. I'll just be writing notes right on the side of the page. The same when I get scripts from Hollywood, I'm making my notes as I go, and suggestions if it's appropriate.
When he calls back, I tape record what he says. He knows it. This is not a secret. And I do that so I can play back what he has told me about the pages I have given him. And also, I attach an outline, part of the outline for the next 10 chapters. And I do that so we can see if anything has changed since the first 10 chapters were written, or if there's anything we want to add, or some big new idea that comes. Normally, it's as written. And then I write the next 10 chapters and send them to Jim. And so it goes, so that he can comment and stop things if it's going wrong, and he can encourage me and tell me it's going great if it's going great.
And I'll read it and get back to the people immediately, like usually that day, and go, I read it, keep going, this is wonderful, or hold it, we're off the tracks. We've lost it in terms of pace, or I'm lost the character, or it's flat, or whatever I think the problems are. And it usually it'll start with something very generic like that. There's no pace to this. It's just all of a sudden it just stopped. The whole book stopped. Or this character, this isn't the character that started the book. Something has changed. Or the writing is very flat for whatever reason. And we'll talk about that. And sometimes I'll go through every chapter and go, here are my suggestions in terms of how this, I think it should work. The interesting thing with Maxine and I knew each other for a long time. She actually was an advertising headhunter who I met, who never got me a job, but I didn't hold that against her. And then she started writing her own stuff, wrote a couple of novels. One of them did fairly well. And then she started writing a lot of magazine articles, which I thought were pretty clever and neat. And she worked a little bit doing some research, and then we tried something together. And it wasn't really cooking, and I couldn't figure out why. And eventually it struck me, and what I asked Maxine to do and what she does now, it just, beautifully, and does it constantly. And I ask all the other writers to do the same thing, is research everything.
Jim said this to me back in the early days. If you're blocked, it's because you don't have enough research. And boy, is that true. I mean, if you don't know what you're writing, you don't have enough information. If you get information, even if it's wrong information, it can lead you to the right information. You research a certain town, the town doesn't work, but something about that town might put an idea in your head that will work for the chapter you're doing. So he told me once, research everything right down to the bee sting, and I do that.
So with Maxine, that was pivotal. And it changed from stuff that I couldn't use to her being, the ideal co-writer. We work great together. But the thing with Chris is, the big strength is he's just freaking hilarious, and it just goes on and on and on. The only thing we always have to be careful of is too many jokes totally overwhelming the story. Okay, it's like the story just stopped because we just got into this joke after joke after joke after joke after joke, and hold it, there's no story anymore.
I think I Funny would be a completely different book if it was just jokes. Joke. But what makes that book work is Jim put the humor and the heart together. And he has this incredible ability to, we'll have some really silly scenes going on and just the craziest stuff. And then there'll be one, the kids write to me and they say they cry when they read that book. There's a couple scenes in I Funny when we find out what put Jamie in his wheelchair and stuff. There's a mystery. There's always a mystery. Pull people through. Why did this kid get in a wheelchair? We're getting hints about it, but why is he living with his aunt and uncle? What happened to him? And then when you finally reveal it, it really can just, warm your heart. And it's like, you want to do that nicely and quickly and not make it all sappy and sentimental, but you want to put some heart in everything you do.
So the balancing act that we always play is okay, let's hold it, because the story just stopped for the last 7 chapters. And it stopped because we stopped being aware of it moving forward, and we got so in love with the writing and the jokes that the story stopped. So that's always the balance with Chris, who is very funny and a very good writer.
When I first started working for Jim, he would always try to put me in the mood for the chapters, you know. And he told me, when this man goes into the house, pretend it's the prettiest little house in the town in which you live. Pretend that he's setting fire to your house, which was a really terrifying notion, but Jim was right. So I put my killer in the house. He went in, he killed the mother. He went in, he killed the father. He went upstairs, he screwed the gun into the ears of the little children. He killed them too. On the way out, he shot the cat. And then he set fire to the whole house. And when it was over, Jim said to me, "I really didn't know you were this bloodthirsty." And I thought, me? You sent me on this mission. I killed a lot of people in that book. And at the same time, I brought the lovers together in the last scene. So when I say I want everybody to know it's also we. We're collaborating during the whole course of this book. And gee, I love to collaborate. I love it. And it's especially great to collaborate with Jim because he knows where he's going. He knows what he wants. He knows when he sees it. And he's a tremendous sounding board and collaborator.
Basically, the co-writing is a one draft process. At the end of the draft, depending on the co-writer and depending on how well it's turned out, I will do rewriting. And then as they will tell you, I fuck it all up by kind of rewriting it.
You know, I find that by and large, people think either that Jim writes the whole book and then he lets us put our name on it, or that we write the whole book and we let Jim put his picture on the back. And in fact, it's a real collaboration. I say this absolutely from my heart. It's a combined effort. He's the mastermind who comes up with the big idea. I write a lot of words between the covers, and he takes the book when it's over. But it is a genuine collaboration. We're always in each other's thoughts, words, and deeds in these books, and it feels very unified.
I've been through the the pain of trying to get an agent, trying to get a publisher, trying to get a good editor. So I know what you're going through. And the best thing I can tell you, it's one word, which is persistence. And just be prepared and don't take it personally. You know, my first book turned down by 31 publishers. You're going to get a lot of rejection here, and a lot of it may have nothing to do with your book. The first novel that I wrote was the Thomas Behrman number, and I sent it out to a few agents and publishers myself. I got back some, rejections, form notices, half page, whatever. A couple of publishers. One publisher, William Morris, actually held it for quite a while. And then I'm like, oh my God, William Morris is going to publish it. Then they rejected it. And at that point, I just happened to read a little piece in the New York Times Book Review about an agent who was taking on young writers. So I sent it over to that agent. And like 2 days later, I get a phone call. And I'm like, oh shit, I can't believe this agent's turned it down that quickly. And the agent actually said, no, I want to handle you. And this may happen to you. The agent said, this is a terrific book. We're going to sell it. You've done a great job. But there are some changes. There's some, that should be made. And he said, I have an editor who I work with sometimes who's really good at working with young writers, Jay Acton. And let me send it over to Jay and see if Jay wants to work with you. Okay, so we go over, I meet Jay Acton, nice guy, smart guy. He has some thoughts. I go back and rewrite for a month or so. We submit it back to Jay. Jay rejects it. I'm heartbroken. The agent says, don't worry. This book is in great shape now. We're going to sell it. they got like 4 offers within the week for the Thomas Berriman number. Then I went in, and this actually was so much fun. Little Brown wanted it the most. In those days, Little Brown was still in Boston, and I went up, on Beacon Hill and went to their offices, and I'm sitting in this room filled with all the books they published, and there's Catcher in the Rye, and there's, Herman Wouk, Youngblood Hawk, and all this stuff, and the fires burning in the fireplace. It's real old-time shit, and it was the best. I mean, I'll never forget, being in that office and thinking, oh my God, they're going to publish my damn book. You need to reach out. You need to reach out to mentors, just trying to get some contacts. Contacts are really important. Introductions are important. If you can get introduced to an editor or a publishing executive or an agent somehow, or any kind of an introduction, it helps. A former professor, a writing teacher, writer friends with published books, media executives, lawyers in the space. Those are all useful in terms of you're just going to have to pester them a little bit, hopefully do it in a way that's not going to, irritate them. I mean, that's persistence without being irritating, because, people swat away irritants. You want to be the kind of persistent person where they get on your side ultimately. If you don't have those kinds of people in your life, you have to try and find them. One of the things you can do in terms of looking for leads is scan the acknowledgement sections of books by authors you admire, or even authors you don't admire, who are relevant to maybe in the genre. You can actually do this at a bookstore or buy the books or in the library, and look for the author's agents' names. That's one place. I mean, if you have you have an author and you see that their agent is such and such, there's some indication that that agent handles writers in the genre you want to write in. You're going to have to send the agent a query letter, and it can be the publisher as well, but you're better off with an agent. If you can get an agent, it's usually important, because the agent is that liaison between you and the publishers. And the agent, their reputation is based on their relationships with publishers and editors. So they're not going to send out something that they don't believe in. But in terms of writing to an agent, or if you're going to go to a publisher, that query letter is essential, because it's not only a sample of your writing, which is important. I mean, you need to really craft that letter. It's also and outline the letter. Outline the letter. What are the bullet points? What do you want to accomplish with this letter? What are the selling points for your book? Outline it. Just put down bullets. Boom, 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 boom. And then what's the perfect order for that? The first line, same with when you're writing the book. It's got to hook that editor or that agent where they're going, okay, I'm hooked right from the get-go here. So if it's just some boring piece about your biography, your autobiography, that's not going to make it. What's the real hook for the editor? Why or the agent? Why should they take on your book? You might go back to the chapter where we talked about first lines. First lines are really important in this query letter, and that first line, you're communicating to another human being. You're asking them to do something that's really going to be difficult for them. They are going to have to spend 6 or 7 hours with your manuscript. They do not want to do this unless you have really convinced them that this is something that either they can make money with, or do just a great thing. In other words, the kind of book that might get spectacular reviews and maybe not make a lot of money. And a lot of agents are cool with that too. And that's another thing in terms of deciding what kind of agent you want to go to. if you look through the literature, you'll be able to get a client list for most of the agents. You'll be able to see who else they handle. That's also useful for you to look at. Obviously, you can send a query letter. You could conceivably send a query letter in a chapter. You could do that if you think the chapter is absolutely going to sell them. So the query letter, if it's a great query letter, and they're really fascinated by the query letter, if you actually send the chapter with, one of two things that's going to happen. They're either going to throw it all in the garbage, or the query letter will drive them to the chapter. And that can work. That can actually begin to seal the deal. Be prepared for, once again, we go back to persistence, okay? A lot of the letters you're going to write, you're not going to get anything back from them. When the Thomas Berriman number, my first book, when that went out and was rejected by several publishers, even though a couple of the letters were encouraging, that is tough. Previous to that, I had sent, out several short stories, and you just get the little form note back. That's really tough because at that point, and I'm sure a lot of you are going through this, you're just questioning, can I do this? Am I any good at it? Is this just a joke? Am I kidding myself? And most of you aren't, but you have to realize how hard it is and how much you have to practice and how hard you have to be on yourself without driving yourself insane. You're going to get rejections, live with it. It's just part of the process. I just recently, I'm James Patterson. I recently sent out letters to half a dozen. I'm doing this documentary series, and I did the first documentary myself, and it's about hometowns. And I sent out to 5 or 6, writers and actors and whatever. And I got nobody wrote back to me. None of the assistants. It's like, huh? If you send me a letter, I'm going to write back to you. So just get used to it. I even at this stage, I'm getting it. When I walked out of the Little Brown offices up in Beacon Hill initially, and way up in Boston, I'm floating. It's just, I can still remember. I can still remember their offices. I can still remember Ned Bradford coming into the room, my editor. I can still remember leaving the place and just walking around, and people looking at me because I was like 6 inches above the sidewalk. Floating, and people look at people when they're floating above the sidewalk. But just that feeling, and then taking the shuttle back to New York, and it's the greatest. It's just, and I think one of the things that is important, I think, and useful, is to learn to really revel in all of the good pieces, okay? Because there's going to be setbacks and, stuff's going to happen. So, you give it to your spouse and they love it. Revel in that. You give it to a friend who you trust and they like it. Really enjoy that, because all that's good. It's one, it makes your life better. It's funny with people. People are strange to me. If you offered me 2 cups, one is a cup of joy and one is a cup of pain, I'm taking the friggin' cup of joy every time. Some people sit there and go, oh, I don't know. On the one hand, I don't know. What are you, fucking nuts? Take the cup of joy. Take the cup of joy. Enjoy it. No book has ever been bought that wasn't picked up. Okay? And to some extent, what makes you pick it up is the cover. It needs to immediately tell people that that's that genre that they love. Oh, I love mysteries. Oh, I love noir mysteries. It looks like a noir mystery. But then it needs to look like a unique noir mystery, one I haven't read before. It's not just an issue of, boy, that's a beautiful design, or that's cool, or that's innovative, or that's new, or I haven't seen that before. It really is, it's a major communication about what's inside. All right, so this is my breakout novel, okay? The first title on this one was Remember Maggie Rose. And that the girl who gets kidnapped, her name is Maggie Rose. So that was the first title. It's not a bad title. One of the issues with it, as a couple issues at a time. One is it really good to be writing a book that you want to really sell well about, a missing child, to make that the key selling point, question mark. Secondly, when I sold this book, part of the deal was that they wanted a second book about Alex Cross. And I hadn't been thinking of a series. It was just going to be this one book. But the publisher wanted a second book. So then we came into, okay, what can help people to identify that it's a series? And what I came up with was nursery rhyme titles, which hadn't been used in a big way. So Along Came a Spider, kind of scary. I can tell that it's going to be thrilling, it's going to be a little scary, but it's not a turnoff. And especially in terms of the look of this. Art directors don't particularly like a lot of type, big type covers, but sometimes they're very, very effective. All of the Robert Ludlums were big type covers. All of the John le Carre. People just go, okay, I get it. It's probably going to be a mystery thriller. It's probably going to be a page turner. So this is a real mass cover, and it's the beginning of a series. And I don't know, it's brilliant, but it worked very well. Now, here, once again, the Little Brown really went all out for this. They got quotes from Nelson DeMille and Clive Cussler, Ed McBain, Ann Rule, and Sidney Sheldon. So they really went for it in terms of, you read this and you go, okay, well, obviously there's some, if you like some of the authors, you go, oh, Nelson DeMille, I like him, he's smart. If he says it's good, I'm kind of believe it. If you got 5 big authors, it's communicating. Obviously, there's a lot of enthusiasm about this book, so I'm feeling good about spending my money on this. No picture, which, as you can see by looking at me, is a good idea. Honeymoon is a good title. Most people have either experienced it or want to experience it. It's a very emotional time. Nothing bad should happen on your honeymoon, nothing tragic, nothing horrifying. So the notion of writing a thriller about honeymoons is I think, a rich one. Now, how do we make it fresh? And Little Brown went through a lot of covers here, and eventually it became, let's put a honeymoon image on there that's really engaging and visual. And they originally had a photograph, and I, for some reason, and once again, this is just emotional, I just felt that I looked at the thing and I went, I don't feel the magic here. It's just not really turning me on. I said, let's try to paint it. Let's try to take a photograph, a sailboat, and paint it instead. And I think if we do that correctly, it'll be fresher and more engaging. So actually, the art director painted it, the art director for the book cover, and I think that the end result was terrific. I think it's a handsome cover. It's just one of those covers that just says, pick me up and buy me. And I've talked all along about this notion of suspense being built around questions that have to be answered. And this is a little bit of a storytelling cover in that, for instance, something bad is happening out there, something very bad. So it's kind of, sucking you in a little bit. I'm kind of interested. So on some level, we also have this, we're posing a question right now. What does Zoo possibly have to do with the city of Paris? The whole thing in the store is you got to get their attention. This is attention getting, and then you have to get them to pick it up. Nobody buys a book that they don't pick up. In the advertising business, and they'd bring new people into the agency, one of the things I would do in terms of trying to explain how can you make it, how can you stay in the business, how can you get famous doing it, I would stand up there with a cream pie in my hand, and I'd look around the room, and I'd invite somebody up, and they would stand by me. And I got this cream pie, and I'm looking at them, okay? And I'm looking at them. And then and I'm the chairman, CEO of the company. I hand them the cream pie, and I go, hit me. They would hit me with the cream pie, okay? And I'd say, with the cream pie all over my face, I would say, this is the whole secret, okay? Hit the consumer in the face with the cream pie. While you have their attention, say something really smart. There's nothing else. That's the whole That's the whole business, okay? And that's the cover. Hit them in the face with a cream pie and then say something smart. Same thing if you have little displays in the store. It's the same thing. Stop them, sell them. Bizarrely, there is a Harvard case study on me. And I think one of the things that the professors found interesting is that they could write about me the way they write about Coca-Cola as a brand. I don't particularly think of myself as a brand, but they at least found that angle to be interesting. It's been written that I've changed publishing somewhat. I think what I changed was just common sense things. Like a lot of businesses, once it gets into a groove, new people come in and they don't change with the times. They just kind of keep doing what they've been doing. And in a lot of cases, I just question everything. It's not necessarily that I want to change anything. It was always this thing, you should just publish the one book every year, and you publish it the same month, and that became a model, and it worked for a publisher, Putnam, for a number of years, and it just became this little machine. And here was Robin Cook, and every April or whatever the month was, he would publish the next novel. And I said, I don't really understand why that should be. And I remember going into the publisher at one point, and I said, I want to do 3 novels this year. And it was like, oh, I don't know about that. And I said, well, let me tell you the books. I gave them the idea for Beach House, which was a thriller set out in the Hamptons. And then I gave them an idea for a book called Suzanne's Diary for Nicholas. And when I went through that story, the publisher actually cried when I was telling him the story. And then afterward, he said, okay, well, we want to do Beach House, but we don't want to do Suzanne's Diary for Nicholas because we don't think it's your brand. And I said, look, not that I know everything about brands, but such as it is, here's what I think a brand is. A brand is a relationship between a product, or in this case, me, and customers. It's just a relationship. I know that Crest toothpaste gets my teeth clean or acceptably clean, or I think it does, and does a little something for my breath. So I have a relationship. I've been using it since I've been a kid, and I don't really want to think about toothpaste so much, and that's just fine. In the case of my books, I think the relationship that I have is, I know that if James Patterson writes a book, the pages are going to turn themselves. That's the relationship. That's the expectation. That's what I'm going to deliver. So that's my opinion about what a brand is. And the fact that I could write in different genres was kind of mind-blowing for a lot of publishers. Then the notion of, oh, he's writing 2 books a year. Oh, my God, he's writing 4 books a year. Oh, my God, 10 books a year. If I stopped writing 10 books a year at this point, a lot of people at the publishing house would have heart attacks, okay? So we've gone from like, how can you do that, to please don't stop. Tragically, because of my lurid past in advertising, I do get sucked into the marketing advertising process, including certainly looking at the taglines that are being written for the books or for the ads, and it used to come down to like what's going to be a particularly good one. For Along Came a Spider, and this was one that I wrote. And what it was is, you can stop waiting for the next Silence of the Lambs. And this was about 5 or 6 years after Silence of the Lambs. And you knew that people were like, and they took a long time to do the sequel. And you knew that people were going, oh, we can't wait. So that notion of at least getting people's attention and the promise of, okay, maybe this is a pretty good one, that's a rich line. It gives me the genre. It gives me a promise. I'm interested. But then you're going to get into the area of print advertising, radio advertising, possibly television advertising. In terms of print, it's the same thing. Here's this space in a newspaper, or this space, or whatever the space is, that I'm going to notice it. and I'm going to be motivated by it. It's kind of that simple. There's an awful lot of stuff shows up in the newspaper, and you're flipping. It's got to be where you go, oh, it's upside down. Don't do that. But I mean, I'd notice it, okay? I'd notice it and go, this is a stupid gimmick, unless it was the upside down book. That was but what's going to get my attention, and then what's going to sort of put it on my wavelength where I'm going, oh, okay, that sounds kind of cool. I like mysteries or whatever, and this sounds like a really good one. Okay, social media, obviously becoming important. There you can help yourself to some extent. You can get a Facebook page. The issue, you can use Twitter. The issue is, how do you get a lot of people paying attention to your message? And some of it is the same thing. You got to put something out there that gets their attention and gets them curious, and then they might go to your page. And so it's the same principle. What am I going to do? Where's my cream pie? What am I going to put out there that gets them to my page? And then when you get them there, what are you saying that's compelling to them? The most important things about marketing your book, especially your first novel, is that whatever the passion that they brought, the reason they bought that book, that passion, that excitement, that gets communicated to the potential buyer. So now, how does that get communicated? One, by how they go out to reviewers. Are they going out with that same passion? Have they figured out a way in a sentence or two to communicate what they feel about it? And if they just babble about it, oh, this, that, and the other, then they haven't figured out a way to put that in a sentence or two, which is the way that you're going to get reviewers to pay attention to the thing. And also, it will influence the reviews. When the book is coming out, it's going to be probably a year or so after they bought it. And they kind of forget how enthusiastic they are. And they forget that same enthusiasm has to be communicated to the bookstores so that they stock the thing, to the reviewers so that they review it, and to the public so that when they see it in the store, they pick it up and hopefully buy it. Before I answer this, I got to take a shot. Ugh. Hollywood. So what do? You're home, you're poor, knock, 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 it's Hollywood, or jingle, jangle, jingle. And I got to tell you, if they want your book, you can't believe how nice they're going to be. You have written the best book we've ever, this is so good. We're going to make the best movie. We're going to start shooting next week, blah, 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 blah. It's all lies. For years, I don't know where this did. I thought it was my line, but the line I'd use for my Hollywood novel, the first line is, hello, I lied. A lot of people out there lie for no reason. I don't get it. I mean, it's just, you don't have to just say, we kind of like your book, and, we'll do our best we can with it. And, 80% of the books we buy don't get made, but we really like it, and we're going to really do it, and that would be great. You'd be going, holy shit, they want my book, It's kind of take the money and run, or take the money and pray. Yeah, that's probably the better thing. Take the money and run and pray. Yeah, that's the best advice I can give you. Having warned you against all of this over and over again, how do you make it happen? A lot of it is luck. I mean, it kind of comes at you. You have a literary agent. The literary agent may also be the Hollywood agent, depending on who you're with. If you're with William Morris, they'll do the books and the movies, presumably. Creative artists might do both. ICM might do both. I have my agent is a lawyer in Washington, and it's kind of weird. I mean, I don't pay like 15% or 10% or whatever. I just pay him by the hour. He does Clinton's, he does Mary Higgins Clark, he's done some of the Reagan stuff, he does Bob Woodward. So that's kind of how I operate. He doesn't really operate in Hollywood. He has the same feeling about Hollywood that I do. He just doesn't, I don't know, doesn't want to spend too much time dealing with them. But generally, your literary agent will either have a Hollywood connection, or if it's a big enough group, and if they think it's a property, they'll go out and try to sell it. You're not going to have any power. That I can almost guarantee, unless they want it so much, and about 3 or 4 or 5 people are bidding for it, and they try not to get into these bidding things now. That's the latest. It's rare that you'll have more than one place bidding for something. It used to be the norm. That's the way the agents operate. They don't operate that way too much anymore. Okay, so let's say that you get lucky and they're actually going to shoot this movie. It's a head trip. I mean, it's just great. You're there, and you won't believe how many people. I mean, we're doing this thing, and there are a lot of people here. This is kind of bizarre with the puppet strings, and they move my mouth and my, But if it's a big movie, I mean, there's just so many people, and also famous actors probably. Like my first movie was Morgan Freeman and Ashley Judd, even though Ashley wasn't that famous at that point. And you're going to be going, oh my God, I can't believe that I had something to do with this insanity but impressive and cool. So it's a big thrill. Definitely try to get to the shoot. On that movie shoot, on the Kiss the Girl shoot, that's where I realized that the fact that I had nothing to do with anything in everybody's mind, and that the novelist ranks somewhere below the caterer on the movie shoot. They know why the caterer's there, but they have no idea why the novelist is there. Remember going out there once and went to Paramount. They didn't like the screenplay of the new Alice Cross movie. We had done Kiss the Girls and Along Came a Spider. They were having a lot of trouble doing the third, even though the first 2 movies did very well. And this is honest to God truth. The only thing in the screenplay that was in the novel was Alice Cross's name. They changed literally everything in the book, every single thing. So I'm sitting there, and I said to this guy from Paramount, I said, well, look, let me just tell you one piece of the novel that I think is very cool and I think could be a movie. And I told him, I wasn't really pitching, but I guess I was. So I pitched this one part of the novel. And he jumps up and goes, I love it, I love it, I love it, I love it. And he pays me $250,000 right there for that idea on a book that they already owned. And I just couldn't believe it. I'm overstating this, okay, to be humorous, but there's a lot of truth to it, sadly. My best Hollywood experience was I was on The Simpsons. I was a cartoon character. As you can tell, I am a cartoon character. And in the scene, and it was a lot of fun. I went in and did the voiceover and, blah, 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 posed for the cartoon. And but in the scene, Marge is on the beach and she's reading Kiss the Girls and she's going, oh, I just love James Patterson. And then we cut and there's a white horse. I'm riding on a white horse on the beach behind her. And then Marge is on the back of the white horse with me. We're riding along and she's going, oh, James, let's do some nursery rhyme titles for your books. And because some of the early Alice Cross had nursery rhyme titles. And I go, Marge, I think there's a lot more interesting things we could do than that, And then an alarm sounds, and my cartoon eyes go, And then we're in their bedroom, Homer and Homer comes in, and Marge is in bed, and Homer says, "That was great last night, Marge, but why did you keep calling me James?" So that's been the highlight of my career in general, but definitely of my Hollywood career so far. I haven't particularly liked any of the movies yet. Morgan Freeman's great. So he's a really terrific, even though he's not the Alice Cross from the books, you can't argue with him. He's so good. Kiss the Girls had its moments. I thought the end scene was terrific in the kitchen. That was terrific. Wasn't in the book. I don't care. The funny thing with they have these press junkets for movies. You write a book in this day and age, you can't find a journalist, for the most part, no reviews. Out comes Son of Chucky 6, and literally every newspaper in the country has a frickin' review of it. It's insane. And they'll have these press junkets for every movie. Okay, Son of Chucky 6, Kiss the Girls, Along Came a Spider. So Paramount invited me out. They always invite out of respect or whatever it is, tradition. They'll invite the novelists out for the press junket. And so they invite me out for the press junket for Along Came a Spider. And they go, I guess they say, we better let Jim see the movie because the press is going to ask him what he thinks of it, So I'm watching this movie from a book that I write, and I watch the first scene, I go, all right, well, that wasn't in the book. And I watch the second scene, and Alex Cross is building a ship in a bottle. I'm going, I don't know, it doesn't seem that cinematic to me. And it wasn't in the book either. And then this woman comes in, and she basically tells Morgan Freeman, Alex Cross, stop with the ships in the bottle, go on out and get yourself shot at or something, because this is supposed to be an adventure movie. I mean, she doesn't literally say that, but that's the spirit of it. And I'm watching this thing, from a book I wrote, and I'm going, who the fuck is that lady? It's not his grandmother, and I don't know who the hell she is, And I wrote the book. I'm mystified. So I see Morgan Freeman a little later in the press junk, and I go, Morgan, who is the woman in the second scene of the movie? Because she never comes back. She just appears in that one scene, and then she never comes back in the movie, which is bizarre in itself. Obviously, the editing room floor, And Morgan looks at me. She goes, "Oh, that's Alex Cross's sister." I said, "Oh, I didn't know Alex had a sister." So that's Hollywood, and that's what you're going to deal with. And the other advice I can give to you, and this is the best advice, and you just saw it there: start laughing, dudes and dudettes. Laugh. You just got to laugh at this stuff. It's very funny if you can have a sense of humor about your own work, and you better if you're going to sell it out there. I don't think I ever had aspirations in terms of, one, being a writer, or secondly, what would happen with it. It just seemed to me to be, overstepping to do that. I came from a background that was, people just didn't make it out of my hometown. I was never, a stylist as a writer, and I'm still not. So I don't think I ever expected that things would happen, and I still don't. I mean, I don't think about it. I don't think about selling a lot of books, or supposedly I'm the best-selling author in the world. I don't really. I love that, but I don't think about it. Grew up in Newburgh, New York, tough little river town, about 60 miles north of New York City. A real mix, which was kind of cool. You had the city itself was pretty tough. Then on the outskirts, you had a lot of farms. So you had kind of city kids, and then you had farm kids. And then we had an Air Force base, Stewart Air Force Base. So in the schools, we had city kids, we had farm kids, and then we had kids who had been all around the world. So it was a nice mix of different kind of ways of looking at stuff. And I think that was useful. My father was brought up in the Newburgh poorhouse called the Pogie. His mother was a charwoman there, and that means that she basically cleaned up the bathrooms for the poor people who lived there. For doing that job, she and my father got one room, and that was his background. Bright guy, somehow got out of that situation and went to Hamilton College, which was a very good college. So that was a real, from the poorhouse to Hamilton College, showed that he had a lot of smarts. My mother was a school teacher for about 50 years. Went to Catholic schools, which are very disciplined. When I was in high school, we had the same brother and people can't even believe that this shit happened back then, but we had the same brother for math and science, sophomore and junior year. Every day he would walk in, he'd say, "Gentlemen, anyone doesn't have their homework, please stand." So let's say I stand. "Mr. Patterson, yes, brother. Do you know what's going to happen now?" "Yes, brother." "Do you know why?" "Yes, brother." From the floor, boom, across your face. Every class. As I went through life, I found that college and advertising were both nothing compared to how difficult high school was in terms of that environment. It was like, yeah, advertising, big deal. Nobody's hitting you, it's all right. You know, I generally write about strong women, and I had strong women in my life. My grandmother in particular, very strong, very strong-willed. I can remember, you know, she's 80 years old, and I go up, I was living in New York City at the time, and I would travel up to 60 miles to see her. And I can remember, like, you know, where the hell is she? And I go in the back, and she's like 80 years old, and she's shimmying a refrigerator down a mountainside to this cabin that she also owned. And I wouldn't do that. If I had three of my best friends there, shimmying a refrigerator down on an oilcloth, and that's just the way, you know, the way she was. You know, could be very sweet, very encouraging. You know, she always had total confidence. She said, I was a pretty good basketball player. She said, you're not going anywhere as a basketball player. You're not fast enough, and you're too little. But there are a lot of things you can do. So, you know, she really built that confidence. You can do a lot of things. If you talk to any of the kids I went to high school with, they'd say, Jim's going to be a doctor or a lawyer or something. That neither one of those appealed to me. Blood, I'm really squeamish about blood, and the law thing really seemed like a horrifying thing to do with my life. And I just started scribbling when I was around 19. I was working my way through college at a mental institution. I wasn't a patient, honest. And I just found that I love scribbling. I just love writing these stories. Somewhere in there, I think I read Day of the Jackal, and that kind of, and An Exorcist, and those stimulated me to think, you know what? These things are really fast-paced. I really enjoyed them. It's another kind of writing. I think at that stage I was a bit of an elitist snob in terms of what I would read. But I read those and I said, these are really good, and I think I can do something like this. And that's what stimulated me to do the Thomas Berriman number. Now, the Thomas Berriman number, that first book, it's really well written. The characters are pretty good. It doesn't have good pace. So it had some of the things going for it. It didn't have enough. It wasn't a bestseller. It didn't deserve to be a bestseller. It deserved to be a very well-received first novel. It was very well received. I was very lucky. One of the exciting things about when you finally get that book published is going into a bookstore and seeing your books there. I went to this, we call it a drive-by signing. It wasn't official. And I arrived at the store, and I was just going to sign books in the back, no audience or anything. And there's 3 or 4 people from the store in the front. They go, oh my God, Mr. Patterson, this is so cool. You're one of our favorites. And we're slapping low fives and slapping high fives going through the store. And they said, we got hundreds of your books in the back. I get to the back, and they got tables filled with Richard North Patterson novels. So I signed them. When Along Came a Spider came out, I picked up the New York Times book review, and there it was, number 6, and I couldn't believe it. It seemed like it wasn't possible. So I went to the local Barnes & Noble in the neighborhood. And if we go into the store, well, first of all, we'll count the books. We'll go, it used to be 12, now there's 9. The book actually seems to be selling. And then if we're in there and you pick up our book, we're watching, and we will watch you. If you put the book down, it breaks our heart. It ruins the day. To this day, if I'm in an airport and somebody puts my book down, I'm like, damn, what did I do wrong? You know, what did the publisher do wrong with the cover, you know? So anyway, so I'm in this bookstore, and this woman picks up the book, and I'm watching her, and then she puts it under her arm, and she's walking down the aisle, and I'm flying, man. She's buying the book. She gets about halfway down the aisle, she slides it into her pocketbook. She stole it. I can't believe it. And all I'm thinking, does that count as a sale? Edgars are the mystery writers of America, and they have these, the award dinner. And this woman's on the phone, and she says, are you James Patterson? I said, yes. She said, we've been trying to reach you for over a month. All right, okay, here I am. And the woman said, you have to come to the Mystery Writers Award dinner at the Commodore Hotel. I think it was the Commodore. And I said, I can't go. She says, I'm sorry, I can't go. She says, you know what I mean you can't go? And I can't remember what there was something that I had to do. And then finally, you know, after a couple of minutes, she goes, well, you have to go because you won. Oh, I said, okay, well, I'm going to find a way to go, you know. So I go to this award dinner. Now, this is a book that's been turned down by 31 publishers. And I now know it's going to win the Edgar as the best first mystery in America, this book that was turned down by 31 publishers, you know. So this is kind of cool. But I'm sitting there in the audience, and, you know, this is like the Academy Awards for mystery writers. And, you know how nervous people get. And they've told me that I won, but I'm still nervous. I'm going, maybe she lied to me, you know, maybe she lied. So until they actually call my name, and so then I go up and I have to give a little speech. And what I said, I remember, something to the effect of, and I'm very shy at this point. I would not be able to just shoot the breeze like I do now. But I say, I guess I'm a writer now. And what that meant, I think a lot of you who haven't published a book go through this, that insecurity. And I actually felt at that point that, okay, this is for real. I'm really an author. I'm really a writer, because I've won this Edgar, as you know, for writing the best first mystery. You know, for me, and I'm not trying to be corny here, family really does come first, and my relationships inside the house are my primary thing. And I always think that this notion of you kind of do the right thing as much as you can, and then you can spread it out, but it has to start with your house. So people that are there and they're going down to Haiti, which is a nice thing to do, and their house is a shambles. I don't mean physically, but just emotionally. I'm going like, you know, fix your house. My dad was an interesting guy in the sense that he never really met his father, and he grew up in this strange environment in this poorhouse, you know, living with his mother in one room. So he didn't really know how to, he wasn't familiar really with the family experience. So he had to kind of learn it, invent it, whatever. And I think he did the best he can. I mean, he worked very hard. He wasn't, he was a little more competitive with me than supportive. I don't think that was ideal, and I've tried not to do that. The only time my father ever hugged me was on his deathbed. And, you know, and I certainly brought that to my son. I give my son a hug and a kiss every night he's home. And he welcomes it. I can give Jack a hug, you know, at school, and fine, I don't care. I don't care what my friends think. You know, my proudest thing, I'm really proud of Jack. I mean, so far so good. He's a neat guy. He has a good spirit, and so that's, you know, I would say that's my proudest accomplishment. My life is very circumscribed, and I think both now and when I was younger, I find things that I like and I do them. So I found I love to write. I love to write stories. I like to write different kinds of stories, from young adult to little kid books to suspense, occasional historical. I just really get a kick out of it. I really love my wife. I really love my son. I like to go out and eat sometimes. I like to be with very good friends. So when I turned 60, I had, 21 friends that go back to grade school. Not all from grade school, but along the way. And those are my close friends. I don't like to spend time with casual friends. My life is incredibly efficient in a joyful way. I mean, I love what I'm doing. I'm not driven to, I don't do things that I find or try not to, painful, laborious stuff, you know, and I like new challenging things. So a piece of why I'm doing this is I haven't done it before. So this is cool. I am peculiar, obviously, and that peculiarity has had its rewards. So I share things with you, and you have to pick what's going to be relevant to you. I think, and I said this to somebody yesterday, that the things that seem the dumbest to you right now, that most foreign, that I'm just dead wrong, those are the things you really want to pay the most attention to. and really analyze whether they, because those are the things that are farthest from what you're doing now and maybe the most interesting and maybe the most beneficial. The things that seem like, oh my God, that's really, that wouldn't work for me, or that's crazy. There's nothing I'm going to tell you that's crazy. That I will guarantee. I am crazy, but what I do is sane. People get too into, this is the way it's been. Here's the rules of writing. Here's the rules of literature. Here's the rule. Who said? Really, God does not come down and lay down, here are the 20 commandments of writing a story. And just because it's been done in a certain way forever does not necessarily mean it's right. And it also means don't walk away from what's been done, but also you don't have to follow it blindly. Things change. We do new shit. Why am I doing this? I like the feeling of doing something that's going to help people. I like giving pleasure to other people. Whatever, and that's not the worst thing in the world. There was a story in the San Francisco Chronicle at one point, and a whale was kind of hopelessly trapped in a bunch of fishing lines and crab traps and whatever. And it was decided that the only way that they could get the whale out was a bunch of rescuers had to literally swim out there and start clipping away with little scissors all of these lines and ropes. And it took them half a day to get this whale loose. And what happened is the whale did not swim out to sea. Rather, the whale went around literally from person to person. These rescuers nudged them, and these people who rescued said that they would never forget that experience, and it changed their lives. And that, I think, is what it's about to give to somebody else, and that's what really moves me, that kind of thing, that I'm going to be out there, and to some extent, for some of you, what I'm saying will change your lives and free you from whatever's stopping you from writing your books or stopping you from writing them successfully. And that, maybe you'll nudge me a little bit before you swim back out to sea and become famous.